Yes, it's Zoom. So Zoom पे आपको मिला है ना? That was Kavita. She's having some trouble getting in. So yeah. Good. So we are on. Okay, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's I'm so happy to see so many friends as well as strangers in the among participants. I was quickly going through the list. So welcome to the Feminist Toolkits to deactivate manel, and mansplaining. Now, just a few house rules at the very beginning. This is happening on the Zoom webinar format. And on my Facebook page, this is being shared for Facebook broadcast. Now, you can, from my page, share it on your pages, and we can make it much more accessible on many pages on Facebook, so that these toolkits that we are going to discuss today can be accessible to so many more people. Now, we are going to have a little discussion and then a question answer session. As many of you know, there's a Q&A dabba, there's a little box of Q&A. Please put all your questions there, and it'll be great if your questions are specific to our panelists. And in the chat box, of course, you can share your stories, you can share comments, you can share what you feel. But if you have questions, it'd be great if you put in the Q&A box. So, you know, as I was going through the registrations, I realized we have 17.07% men today. So that's, we were wondering how many we would have. So welcome, men and womex. But seriously, this discussion is for all the, as we said, as Meera keeps telling me, the non-men out there. And how do we deal with this world of manels and man-explaining? As the lockdown started, all our discussions, all our conversations that we would otherwise have face-to-face in sort of seminar rooms, conferences, etc., moved online. And what that did is, no matter which city you were in, if you were in a WhatsApp group, you were getting the posters, the social media announcements, etc. And I'm on many WhatsApp groups, you know, many of them progressive, left-leaning ones. And what suddenly struck me was all these posters that I was getting had only faces of men, like mostly faces of men, a few that had one single woman, and very, very few which actually had a slightly more diverse kind of range of speakers. So at this point, I want to see what your experience has been. And I'm doing a little poll. You will see this poll panel opening up, and you can vote for, among all the panels that you have come across recently, let's say, approximately what percentage has been manels? And manels mean had only men on the panel. Yeah, just you have 30 seconds. What do you think approximately? I mean, many of us don't count, but what would you say? How many had only men? Okay.
You want us to try and...
Pardon?
You want us to try and... I'm not able to click on it. You want us to...
No. So this is not for panelists. This is only for attendees.
Okay.
So yeah, panelists will have our say. This is for attendees too, for us to see how their experience has been. So yeah, awesome. Lots of people are voting. I'll give another 5 seconds for your votes. Think about it. Oh my God. Okay, fantastic results. Okay. I'm going to end the poll now and share with you the results. So this is what it looks like. 40% said that more than 75% were only manels. About 50 to 75% of manels gets 42. So which means more than 50% of panels that we see, it more than 80% people here feel that more than 50% panels that we see have only men on them. So obviously, that is where the idea of this panel started. The beginning, the shock and the anger led to a desire to have a conversation on what apparently a lot of people told me was this is an oversight, maybe, you know. And there was something that kept telling me it's not just an oversight, there's something much more than that. I wanted to have this conversation about what is behind this symptom that we are seeing. What are the conditions and the context that produces this culture? What are the reasons why it's there? How does it impact how we see ourselves? How does it impact us? How does it make us feel? And I wanted to have this conversation with a few women whose work I tremendously respect, who have in their own ways, with passion, with rigor, have been engaging and negotiating with the world that is mostly run by men, and who I genuinely love for the way they think. And they're very varied. And that's when I thought that I mustn't just keep that conversation. I could have easily had this conversation one-on-one with them. But what if we shared this conversation in a collective group, among people who would also love to listen to them? And I'm so deeply grateful that our panelists today, Kavita, Raina, Paramita, Nisha, Meera, and Nisha, have agreed to join us. Most of you know them, but I'll still introduce a little bit, just in a line for how they want to be introduced. And they're now going to be in the gallery view. So you're going to see all of us together. Kavita Krishnan, Secretary of All India Progressive Women's Association, IPA. She's also the editor of Liberation. We have Meera Sanghamitra, activist, solidarity worker, National Alliance of People's Movement. We have Nisha Abdullah, theatre maker and educator. We have Nisha Susan, poet, writer, founder of Ladies Finger. We have Paramita Vora, filmmaker, writer, Antakshari player, and founder of Agents of Ishq. And we have Raina Roy, trans rights activist, founder of Shamo Bhavona, and one of the founders of Amra Adbhut. Thank you, dear women, for making this evening possible and coming together to discuss this. So I want to open with this, so when all this was happening and I was seeing so many panels, I got in touch with the organizers just to understand, because these organizers often were progressive, left-leaning, sometimes men, but sometimes also women who were organizing these panels. Ki, kya hai? Why no women? Why only men? And I got a series of answers. It started from no women in the field. These are the best people in the field. They are anyway experts in the field. So why are you bothered? You will still get the gyan that you want to about this subject. We call women on women's issues. We tried to call women, but nobody was good enough in this field. There are women, but not good enough. Some actually thought the question itself was sexist. That was a jaw-dropping moment for me. That to ask why men itself is a sexist question. Then there was another answer I got, which was that women will be there in the audience. So actually, because we are having a very interactive session, it's going to involve women in any case. Now, of course, they also said one couldn't hold one panel responsible for the burden of centuries of patriarchy and what to do. Slowly, slowly, you will get there. And then a question was posed to me. Do you want us to just invite a woman as a token? Are you a believer in tokenistic equality? So I want to ask each one of you, what do you think is the real problem? What's happening here? And may I go with Nisha? Shall we begin? Nisha, Susan, shall we begin with you? And then, I could just name one after the other and see how we go down this.
Sure, I'm happy to start. I think when I think about this kind of incredible confidence that men have when they, are in the world, regardless of whatever level of competence or mediocrity that they may be in. I think the story that I always think of is my father and his friend playing badminton on the weekends in a very small town on the coast in Oman. This is in the 1990s. Okay, so they were like weekend 1 hour of badminton kind of people. They were playing badminton. I emphasize this because one day after 45 minutes of badminton, my father's friend, like was drying himself off and said, I could take Steffi Graf, right? So my father turned around and said, what? And he said, like, I could take Steffi Graf, right? So basically his thing was, I couldn't obviously get into the Wimbledon male like scene, but I mean, him, like this random accountant in coastal Oman could take Steffi Graf. He thought that was a viable, possibility.
They
So,
were playing
I mean, I think of
badminton,
him
right,
often
Nisha?
because there are badminton
Huh.
and thinking of Steffi Graf. Okay. So, I think of this level of confidence and how it, you continue to see it everywhere. It's that Men in Black, the old movie, there's a moment where Will Smith is being interviewed for this like secret force, and he's surrounded by these military like boys who are all very like, like military. And when they are asked, do you guys know why you're here? And he obviously is like, why am I here? But one of them stands up and says, because we are the best of the best of the best. Okay. And then Will Smith like laughs at him because obviously he doesn't know either why they're there. But that feeling seems to be something that they carry around, that wherever they are invited, they are the best of the best of the best. So I mean, if we can't beat it, we should just bottle it. I think bottle it and like liberally use it like scent in summer days.
But it's also about this best now, which you said, and I was thinking that how do we think best, because I got that this is the best we could get, saying that obviously having women would mean necessarily a sort of low quality product, low quality expertise in the same area. And so often even the fact that women are invisible in this doesn't quite strike people. So that's another observation I made, that it's, and if you say anything, it's like, oh God, she's come back with that same question again, which also makes you feel slightly, I don't know, you want to sort of sink somewhere. And so, Meera, I was thinking, do you want to come in with your reason of what really happens?
Actually, yeah, I was just taking off from what Arundhati, you were also saying in the beginning. One would think that, and in fact, it is pandemic or no pandemic. Let's deploy the word mandemic over here. And the whole Manel syndrome is something that has always existed. It is universal. I mean, it's across all places and contexts, and it is it's the norm basically, right? And wherever it has changed because there has been some resistance and questioning and all of that. So we've seen it in so many other contexts. For instance, when you refer to someone actually responding to you saying that अरे महिलाएं तो audience में बैठती है ना, वहां से सुन के ज्ञान लेगी. So I think this is something that you see everywhere. I mean, not just in the context of say virtual Manels, but also, I mean, I immediately relate to, I mean, the Gram Sabhas where men do not think women have to be there. I mean, ग्राम सभा का जो resolutions पास होता है वो महिलाओं की presence और भागीदारी के बिना ही पास हो जाती है. या पंचायत का, I mean, we are talking of a manel over here. I'm imagining a पंचायत चौपाल जहां पर उस चौपाल पर mostly men बैठते हैं, महिलाएं नीचे बैठती है. So that's a very different corollary of what a manel can be in a different context. So this is across urban, rural, and all kinds of contexts. I think this is something that we really see. But two things that I would really want to point out at the outset is, one is, I mean, there is this whole chalta hai attitude, right? कि मतलब ये लगता भी नहीं कि इसमें कुछ अटपटा है. So, I mean, when the whole Manel's, the whole syndrome of Manel's is connected to patriarchy. So, and patriarchy chalta hai largely, no? So, I think how do we move from a chalta hai attitude to a nahi chalega attitude is, I think, the challenge before all of us. कि ये Manel syndrome nahi chalega. That men will sit and decide, or men will assume all authority, men will assume all power and knowledge, is something that will not work, is, I think, the challenge before us, and something that we've all been constantly striving. And the second point, which I just wanted to make briefly, is about the whole burden of change. I mean, often, and in fact, invariably, the burden of questioning, the burden of changing is on women, is on non-men. So, I mean, as long as, and it, again, this is across multiple other contexts as well, right? I mean, in the whole anti-caste struggle, the struggle for annihilation of caste is primarily on Dalits. Why is it so? Right, in this whole context of patriarchy, the burden of annihilation of patriarchy is on women. Why is it so? I think at the very outset, we must also locate some of these questions and connect it with the whole Manel syndrome, because the Manel syndrome is more a symptom of the larger malaise that we are all besieged with.
Thanks, Meera. Thanks for that. May I ask Paramita now? Paramita, would you chip into that? The idea of Paro, you're mute, Baba.
I mean, I think that, we all have encountered these things outside us and inside, I mean, towards us, and also viewing in different ways. So I want to actually extend this idea of the Manel to other situations where we see that patriarchy chalta hai, which I think is a great phrase, and how anything that is to do with women is an exception, it's something special, it's token, it's of lower quality. All of these things are true. So in every film that I've made, for example, I have encountered it somewhere or the other. The first film that I made, Annapurna, was about a women's credit cooperative in Bombay, and the women who founded it be part of the trade union movement. And while they were doing their work, they would encounter women who used to run khana wells, make meals for for the workers, but they were a kind of unorganized labor, right? And then they started speaking in the union that I think we should also work with vegetable vendors and all these women who basically have fallen out of the formal workforce because of laws like maternity leave, etc. And now they have to take money from money lenders and we should do something. And then everybody told her in the union, Twema Purao, that don't ask us to do something special just for women. So the idea that anything you do for women is not for the rest of the world or not part of life or not part of humanity even. This you encounter in many ways. And the other place is that I made a film on toilets. And in the film, I would often be searching for a public toilet for women. And I found one near Dadar station, which is a very busy station in Bombay, where there was only a gents loo and no loo for women. And when I asked the men who were generally hanging around outside that why is there no loo for women? And they said, I think, because women need more space when they squat. So that's too much trouble. So actually, it's so transparent that any space women take up is too much space. Space is not meant for them, and they should definitely not be taking up air space, pee space, any space, right? And I think that what ends up happening is because, yes, patriarchy chalta hai, and it becomes a way to value things. People are also very anxious when they have to value women, right? Like, I think that women are loved secretly by many people, but when they have to do something which they have, like when it has to be a public endorsement, they feel, let me just take the safe way out and get some gents on the panel. And I'm using the word gents consciously because, if gents can have a gents loo, then let everything be called a gents something or the other. So there was this one time when I got invited to an arts festival in France for a retrospective, which obviously was very exciting for me. I was pretty young. And I never thought that anybody would bother to do such a thing. And around a month before the retrospective, obviously when you're going for such a thing, it's planned way in advance. The person who was doing the liaising for India was a woman. I knew her through other work that we did. And then she called me up a month before saying, actually, we might have to disinvite you because we were thinking that it would be more representative to invite a famous gent with a dadi, of course, because he has this big body of work. He's a very seminal filmmaker. And you are like a counter feminine voice. So
even
again,
the word seminal has a history, right?
Yes. So I mean, the thing is that,
but is that why you're using it, or was that word used?
Yes, well, I wouldn't say it twice if I didn't mean to say it. So the thing is that it was so easy. I mean, I got uncharacteristically annoyed because most of the time we're also taught to be the word that Nisha has taught me, dignity. You feel that how can I be so shameless and say that I'm valuable and please call me.
Or throw a tantrum. Yeah.
Yeah, because as women and also as middle class people, we are taught all these kinds of ideas of propriety, right? So, but that time, my father had just died like a few days before. So I was not in my normal senses. So I said, well, maybe I should write to your boss and explain that you think it's more representative to have a guy with a beard than to have me after you invited me 6 months ago. So she said, no, 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 that's okay. So I think it's so interesting that the person in between was trying to tell somebody who had chosen me that you have chosen wrongly, because you should have really called the person whom everybody has done millions of retrospectives of already around the world one more time. Otherwise, there will be less value in your festival, right? So I think, yeah, mansplaining, manners, and I don't know, manholes that we are all the time falling into in this way. I think they occur in a number of ways, and the panel is one more version of it.
Yeah, yeah. And that really was, our reason for making this the entry point, and through what else but yet another panel. But now I have a surprise for the audience and some of you panelists as well. We have none other than Rebecca Solnit amongst us, and we're going to invite her on for a little bit. She needs to, unfortunately, she's at a totally wrong time zone on the other side of the world, but she has come here and she'll just share her thoughts a little bit with us. And for those of you who may not know, in 2004, she wrote this book came out with essays, and one thing was called When Men Explain Things to Me. And from there, an anonymous person, which I, for the longest time, thought Rebecca herself had coined the word mansplaining, which is the third word in our panel today. Yay, Rebecca, you're here. You're here. Yes, thank you so much. It's like what? Early morning, 5:30, 6 o'clock. Rebecca, you're mute. You're on mute.
I was. Good morning from New Mexico, all you for whom it's good evening in India. This is so lovely. When I wrote the essay Men Explain Things to Me in 2008, I had no idea brilliant women in India would be discussing going forward from that idea. And how many years later, 13 years later, we were actually going to throw a bat mitzvah for the essay, but the spring was busy. But it did turn 13 in March or April. What should I say?
Share with us your thoughts on this, on mansplaining. Anything that you would like to share.
I think what's been remarkable since an anonymous blogger actually coined the term mansplaining is the realization that with new terminology, new frameworks, we can identify old problems that were unidentified, and how people have taken it forward. In the US, white-splaining has also become an important term, where white people explain racism, histories like that to people of color. And there's been innumerable permutations of the word. So, and manhole is another one. One of you just said manhole and talked about women falling into manholes. And I feel like what just happened on this panel should be the next contribution to this vocabulary. A manhole as a pit a woman falls into when she tries to discuss equality, gender politics, liberation, what the hell she was trying to talk about before someone cut her off, something like that. You all can figure out what a manhole is conceptually, metaphorically, but I feel like on this panel, it has just entered the feminist discourse. Or maybe you were all using it before. What would I know?
Manhole was something that Paro mentioned, and mandemic is the one that Mira, and we were thinking of making a glossary actually of new words that that can be added, like make a feminist dictionary of our favorite terms of being. So Rebecca, what is your feminist toolkit to deactivate?
I hang out with doctors a lot, and so I always feel like the beginning of addressing any problem is a diagnosis. You may not be able to cure it, but you can treat it, or at least know what's going on when you diagnose it. So just having the toolkit is huge, and terms themselves are crucial to a toolkit. If you can't describe something, you can't recognize the pattern, the mandemic, orchestrate a response, discuss it, etc. But for my toolkit, I think it's for all of us, just the ability to point these things out, to say this is happening, it has a name, we've seen it before, this is why it sucks. This, is crucial to the work we need to do to have conversations be equal and inclusive.
Rebecca, my last question to you. Does one have to be really annoying and scrappy as women to actually be able to put our word out there? And does that not often make us a bit less joyous? Or is that the terms of engagement here? Can one avoid that, or is it necessary to be scrappy? Because sometimes one doesn't feel very happy about being scrappy all the time.
And it isn't, and there's so many ways to answer that question. One thing is, of course, women are constantly pushed to fight for the rights, and you do feel a little bit less gracious and secure and serene when you're having to kind of elbow your way into something that should have been yours in the first place. On the other hand, I think a lot of times, I think it was Rebecca West who said, anytime I distinguish myself from a doormat, I'm perceived as I'm not getting it quite right. But any woman who is not a doormat is perceived as furious, angry, out of line, aggressive, demanding, etc. So part of it is, how do we contextualize women's behavior so that anger might be beautiful, speaking up is a sign of strength, the behavior that we're often told is unladylike is instead seen as powerful, admirable, etc. So I wonder if there's some recontextualization due there. And, and then to look at all the way that men are scrappy and whiny and needy and demanding, etc. Because there's also an ocean the size of the Pacific of inappropriate male behavior that is overlooked or treated as appropriate. And,
or legitimized in some way as a privilege. It's legitimized in a certain way. It's a privilege.
Yeah, women's behavior is pathologized and men's normalized for a lot of what happens in marriages, in conversations, in power struggles, and absolutely everything. I think we might be able to agree.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thanks, Rebecca, for joining us in spite of the difference.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Yeah. I will be coming to India to collect the sweets that I have been promised as a reward.
You will have to swim in that bathtub, if you remember. That was your promise.
The rose water syrup swimming pool.
Yes. Yes, I have promised homemade chana bada, which is balls of cottage cheese deep fried in sugar syrup and rose water for Rebecca whenever she lands up in India next. Thank you. Thank you so much, Rebecca.
Thank you all. Lovely to see you all doing this.
And I hope you're able to stay with us in the audience for a while before you have to leave.
A little bit longer.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so thanks, Rebecca. Now we move on to our next panelist. Can I bring in Nisha Abdullah here? And we were talking about what really is the problem.
I'm still in the afterglow of having Rebecca as one of the faces. Just adding on to what everyone has been saying so far, and what we already touched upon a bit. One of the most important realizations for me after I got to know this word, and such an important naming, one of the most important namings that changed so many things for me, and I'm sure so many women around, was just to see that this sits in, under all of these power structures that already exist. So a lot of the times what we see as mansplaining and manners are just sexism plus, casteism plus, Islamophobia plus, bigotry plus, right? So when we talk about normalizing, it's also because our culture has normalized so many of these, power structural problems, that to take it apart and say, acha, this vein is mansplaining, this vein is actually because of my particular intersectional identity, this vein is supremacist, and just to see how they all kind of sit together in this mishmash of blah, right? So that was an important realization for me. So just, how is, what is the problem? Just the fact that this entire cultural, structure that we sit in, everything ultimately comes back to that, because it's all freaking interconnected. So just to be able to say that, hey, this is not just mansplaining. You're not just mansplaining to me. You're also mansplaining my very specific lived experience as a, for example, Muslim woman, because I get mansplained a lot about religion and politics. So specifically to say this and that is, to me, very important.
Thanks, Nisha. I'll move to Raina now. Raina, from your perspective, what do you think is the reason behind why we see men's voices all around, whether it's on panels or in the many other areas where our panelists have already suggested? And it's almost like a legitimate thing that's what's going to happen, and women's voices will be invisibilized over a period of time.
I think within this panelists and people who are watching, especially for man, me and Meera, according to my knowledge, who are challenge of the total patriarchy. And what I like to say that are we talking about biological male, or are we talking about manliness, masculinity, toxicity, or the monopolization? So the thing is, and this is have to be remembered, that we are the panelists who know, who have some vocabulary, who can explain this thing, who have that certain kind of privilege of languages. By this, we what we want to say, we can say it. But if we look at the total cultural spectrum and the diversity, then man always trying to take enter, because not intentionally always, because this is the outcome of the total patriarchal system. Not the patriarchal, this is also there is also related with the caste, class, culture, religion, everything is there. We heard about mankind. We ever heard about womankind? We never. We think detective means man. We think that we had discussed a lot. But when somebody telling us that you are exception and you need to prove yourself, there is a force to prove yourself within the certain privilege, whatever that masculine privilege, financial privilege, or whatever the privileges, that you need to prove yourself that you are exception within the exception world. You are the hyper active within the minority community. तो इसीलिए जैसे मीरा ने बोला मैंडेमिक और रेबिका ने भी बोला, तो निशा ने भी बोला, तो ये मुझे लगते हैं कभी कभी कि ये पैंडेमिक के पहले का जो मूवमेंट हो रहे थे, जैसे शाहीन बाग और जैसे जिस तरह के मूवमेंट हो रहे हैं, वो मूवमेंट पूरा बदल गए एक पैंडेमिक और लॉकडाउन में। हम लोग एक नए जिंदगी में चले आए और वहां पे अचानक एक सिस्टम हमको ऐसा दिया गया हुआ है, और वेस्ट बंगाल के बोर्ड के पहले भी मैंने देखी है, जितने सारे टॉक शोज होते थे सारे मैन आते थे, and I never heard about any leaders who are talking about that woman liberty. I think माँ बहन माँ जैसे उसका खुद का कोई आइडेंटिटी नहीं है, और वो कभी माँ बहन, कभी किसी का बहू और कभी किसका, वही जगह में हम लोग पड़े हैं। and I brought up within a very communist and leftist family. And I think that most of the time, what I have seen, the women who willing to prove their worth, they need to give more and more hard job rather than a man, because man has been taken for granted that they are man and they have that masculine privilege. तो इसके लिए मुझे मुझे लगता है कि ये बदल एक पैनल में तो नहीं होंगे, पर ये बदल थोड़ी थोड़ी चीज करके हम लोग बता सकते हैं। जैसे मैं लोकल चेन में सफर कर रही थी, एक मतलब कलकत्ता के बाहर गए हुए थे, एक गांव में, गांव से आ रहे थे, तो एक मतलब एक group of Hijra people came and asking money with a clapping, and they were much hyper, and they were quite, that quite hyper kind of expression they were. So और मेरे पास एक लड़का बैठा था जो एक बहुत ही फेमस कम्युनिस्ट पार्टी के लड़के, और वो लड़का मुझे बोल रहे थे, have you heard about Ritu Parno Ghosh? I said yes. So that why these people doing this? Why are not you projecting them in different ways? I just turned my head and asked him why you are here, why you are not Chaudhary Joy or Ritik Ghatte. So then it was quite like, no, I was not telling to. Oh, I was not trying to tell this, but ये जो assume कर लेते हैं मैन, ये ही मैनेज प्लानिंग है, और ये मैनेज प्लानिंग थाप देते हैं इंसान के ऊपर। और मैं तो इतना ही बोलूँ, क्योंकि ये तो पहले फ्यूडलिज्म, फिर जो डेमोक्रेसी हम जीते हैं वो डेमोक्रेसी नहीं है, छोड़ दीजिए। उसके बाद कैपिटलिज्म, उसके बाद ग्लोबलाइजेशन, हर जगह में ये मैन और जो ये एडवर्टाइज देखते हैं टीवी में, जो एडवर्टाइज देखते हैं वो बहुत अच्छी नॉलेजेबल लोग बनाते हैं, और उसमें हमेशा पेट्रियार्की को कॉर्पोरेट करते हैं। मैं तो इतना तक बोलूंगी, लेकिन बोलने का तो बहुत कुछ है। थैंक यू।
Nice, Raina. I'm going to come back to you. मैं वापस आऊंगी आपके पास दूसरा क्वेश्चन लेके, but with this one, I'm now going to Kavita. Kavita, your turn. What is the real problem?
See, I think problem, though, we all know what it is, which is that I think the problem is that people can't see the problem. So, the inability to see the problem is really, because even when the problem is pointed out, I am inevitably one sees that the response, the minute you point it out, the response is a sort of hurt irritation. There is a sense that how could you think that I am being patriarchal? How could you think that we are being patriarchal? So the immediate thing is to personalize it very much and to see it as an attack. And that puts the person pointing it out, inevitably, usually a woman, with some exceptions. So the person pointing it out has to be, and especially if the person pointing it out is not a man, then that person has to be extra tactful. And you're not expected to make public criticism. You should be, private persuasion is okay. Public criticism, not at all, And I think that we saw that play out quite recently also in this human rights panel on UAPA, where not only was it a panel of eminent Supreme Court judges, where if you're going to say retired Supreme Court judges, well, you're going to end up with men, because there are, the only few women judges who reach there are dead. So you're not going to get people. So when that was pointed out, and not only did they have a panel, but they had a sexual harassment tainted judge. So when this was pointed out, the response, I think, was really unfortunate in a way. And I feel sad about that, because I think that, it's so tiring. How many times, and how tactfully are these things going to be raised? Invariably, that labor of raising it is going to be done by the people who are not men, while the rest remain silent. Men remain silent. So even when a woman is being attacked for having it pointed out, then others will remain silent and try to say, see, basically. So your silence then implies that this noisy person should just, go away, and that we don't endorse this, right? We don't endorse this question. So I really feel that that is it. There is an unwillingness and sort of willful inability to see the problem. And one more thing which I really have to share as something I wish people would pay attention to. Everybody. See, I'm talking about those who are sensitive to the idea of a manel and who, the minute they see a manel, want to complain about it. And very good for you. But let me request you that if you're going to call out an organization for a manel, don't pick up the phone and call the only woman there. Don't call the women in that organization and start badgering them, because they are probably the ones who've already been facing the flak, making the noise, and then, have clearly failed on some occasion or the other. Please let the men feel the heat. Please let the non-men not feel the heat all the time. Please direct the heat towards the men, so that they experience the embarrassment or whatever it is which is going to make them think about it next time. Otherwise, it's going to keep happening. And the women or the non-men in that organization are the ones who are going to get the reputation for being these, killjoys who are continuously pointing out, why is it only men? Why is it only men? So that also I feel really strongly. And I can't tell you, of course, I mean, one last thing, that I don't think a day goes when some man or the other on social media does not try to explain to me how women should protest. What is the best way and what you're doing it wrong. There is not a single day that does not happen.
Kavita, I also remember somebody who wrote when you had shared the poster for Aaj Ka Ye Sham, that that man was really upset that we didn't have any man on the panel today. It was hilarious.
Right.
I remember, Paramita, once you had shared with us how we were having a chat just before this panel, and you had shared how you talked about this loud, that the troublemaker, like even if there are 1/3 room is full of women and 2/3 is men, still the sense is there are too many of us, like we're taking more space, we are being louder than we should be. So there's a need to shrink.
But that's not, it's not an anecdotal or observational thing I was saying. It was an actual study that they did, where they asked men, how many women were in the room? And if there were 20% of the room was women, they would say 50% or more. So it is so, I mean, I'm also want to recommend that one should sympathize कि इतने डरे हुए हैं कि when they have seen, like, how can you be such a darpok that because 20% women were in the room, you felt like the Russians are coming, my God, something is going to happen to us. But it's the idea, it's not like just the feeling, but of course the feeling we know that, when you speak up, like, I mean, I know it's not my turn to speak, but I'm going to do the non-manel thing and speak as a bossy woman. That once somebody, a man colleague of mine said to me when we started working together, that before I met you, because I used to read your column in the paper, I used to think you'll be very opinionated, but you're actually quite nice. And I just said, well, I am opinionated. I write an opinion column. It's my job to be opinionated, actually. But that contrast that was presented, it's too innocent. I mean, I just feel the permanent innocence of men is something to be envied. Permanently scared, permanently innocent about the world.
And
right?
permanently confident, like Nisha Susan began. Nisha, I'm saying Nisha Susan only because there are two Nishas, and just to like sort of, she began by saying the permanent confidence also of men. So I just to share something that Kavita said, recently on a sort of very, very leftish kind of group. And there were posters after posters of these manels. And of course, there were some of us who would raise protest and say. So at one point, one guy got really upset with us and said, how can you think that we are so low-minded, so mean-minded, this all happening in Bangla, that we can actually consciously not have women? We are not like that. So then I was thinking, how does one respond? And finally, one had to say that, can you then consciously have women? Like, I didn't know how else to say it. What else do you say? Because there was so much this think that I am the only man who's been speaking for women all my life, and you're casting aspersion on me. It's so personal.
Permanent hurt also, Arundhati.
Permanent-
Permanent hurt.
So we have
With
a
all-
long list of words. We have mandemic, manhole, monopolization, manalysis, and we have some permanence. We have permanent confidence. We have permanent hurt. We have permanent innocence, right? Paro, that's what you said, permanent innocence. Okay. These are going into the Bama Sutra we are going to put together, right? At some point. Yeah. Okay, so I'll come, but before I come with my next question, again, we'll do one round. I have another little, very obvious, a little poll for everyone to participate, and I'll just put it up. What's the next poll? Wait, yeah. Yes. So this is, have you ever been explained something by a man about which you already knew quite a bit, but he did not have the sense to find out before giving gyan? This is for non-men, mainly in the audience, and we have about like 20 seconds to see. I can see the answers, so I will soon share. Yeah, a little more. So we have three answers here. We have yes, no, and maybe. And we put in the maybe because suddenly we felt that, sometimes you don't quite know. You're so doubtful about your own self. You don't know whether what is being done to you is mansplained. So we put in the maybe. Okay, I think we've got our answers and they look fabulous. This is how they look. So 95% say yes, 0% say no, 0. And 5% say maybe. That's quite, that tells us something. Okay, so I'm going to move to this now. Has this gone? Yeah. I'm going to move to my next question. I know through your own work in your own areas, in the arts, in politics, in education, in activism, you deal with this on an everyday basis. Some of you are in leadership roles in organizations, in movements and struggles. Some of you are individuals, individual creators. What's your technique or your feminist toolkit, let's say, because that's what we've themed today's discussion on. How do you respond? One, techniques to deal with certain situations that may arise, to do with mansplaining, with dealing with patriarchal, the fallouts of patriarchy in your life and your work. But on the other hand, talk a little bit maybe about your work per se, because many of you in your work as well, in your practices as well, are trying to engage, unravel, rupture, poke holes at to patriarchy in different ways. So maybe this time we start the other way around, and Kavita, maybe we'll go with you first. आपका unmute नहीं हुआ.
Oh shit. Okay. I'm so sorry. Yeah. It's entirely this thing. Yeah. So I think that basically this whole what you said initially about the confidence with which people go about this, right? And I also think that this automatic assumption that what is expected is just at best a minimum accommodation, So, let me tell you about, for instance, on Delhi buses, I used to feel this a lot, that you have some seats reserved for women, right? So if I would sit on a seat on one of the other seats, so there used to be some guy or the other invariably would come up and say कि आप पुरुषों के seat पे बैठे हुए हो. So then I used to have to explain sometimes politely, sometimes impolitely कि वो सारी सीटें, then I developed a dialogue for this. I used to say कि ये सारी सीटें पुरुषों की नहीं है, दुनिया भी पुरुषों की नहीं है, वो सबकी है. मिनिमम महिलाओं के लिए वो 6 सीट पे सिर्फ महिलाएं बैठेंगी कम से कम. उसके ज्यादा भी बैठे ना, ऐसा थोड़ी है कि बस उसी 6 पे बैठना है. So this I remember, in political experience also this would keep happening, because I know that, in my student days also, I remember that in a way I'm kind of grateful for it, because I think that the kind of person I was and my friends were, we used to run away from taking, political responsibility and center stage. We wanted to, hide in the shadows. So it was an instance of tremendous manel and mansplaining, where basically somebody proposed our names to be in the leadership of the student group we were part of. And one guy there stood up and said, but there's already one woman, why do we need more? And that made us all get up and say, what complete nonsense, and we demanded to be in the leadership. So later, of course, the people who were trying to, the men and women who were trying to get us into leadership were very happy and very grateful to that guy. कि यार उसने इतना काम किया, भला काम किया कि it made them get rid of the shyness. But that's what. But I kept seeing this, and I still keep seeing this. That the expectation is that basically, it's not supposed to be odd to have a bunch of men experts. And it's okay for people to say, yeah, we tried for one woman and, we didn't really find anyone, so kya kare? But that's not it. I mean, how is it that you're not able to find more people? How that clearly you haven't looked, right? And so I really think that how to change this visual field, how to change what people see is really part of the challenge. And I know that here we are enjoying a joke about manners, and that's good, but really the challenge is why do my good friends, my good comrades, why are they unable to see it? How do we change that? I really don't have an answer there. If Paromita or Meera or someone has a smart way to do this, some kind of Ramban ilaj iska koi hai, wo to bata do bhai.
Thanks, Kavita. Actually, I'm reminded of this class, this management students I was teaching. And teaching matlab, I was sharing with them what we do at India Foundation for the Arts and the kind of work we support. And then suddenly one girl asked me something which I still remember. She said, how do you know what is not in the room? I felt that question has been a very important question for me. That, it's not in the room. So how do you know it's not in the room? Like, what sense of the larger universe must I have, therefore, to know that this is not in the room, and the room is only one part of the world, which is excluding so many things. So that, I mean, what you're also asking, Kavita, is that how do we figure out how to make people see what is not in the room, how to understand that? Paro, shall I come to you now, and then maybe I'll go to Raina, Nisha, Meera, and Nisha Susan at the end of this round. Yeah.
I think, the question of how do you know what's not in the room might apply if that's the only place you've ever been, right? If you never leave the room, okay, maybe you can say that, but we're all in many rooms. So I actually have never felt like I need to, that my knowledge is constrained by what is in the room, because I know there are other rooms. I have been in those rooms and I know that there's stuff there. So what I have seen in other rooms helps me to critique what is in the room. And I think that also, in terms of, I think I, as an independent artist, I really took the easy way out, you could say, in some ways, because quite early on, like for me, the way that I understood that I don't have tolerance for mansplaining was the fact that I had no tolerance for feeling bored when people spoke to me. And that feeling of, stop it, you're boring me, used to like come like Jwalamukhi inside me, like, when any elder relative would start giving me a lecture about my own profession, my own behavior, my own plans for the future. For example, somebody once read my palm, one of my uncles, and said, yeah, okay, you'll flirt with these things which you're doing for a while, but later you'll become normal. So, all of this, more than angry, I used to feel that intense boredom. Then on dates where, men would start telling you jokes, and I'd be like, please don't tell me a joke. I get very bored when people like performatively tell me a joke like that, right? But they won't listen to you. So I think like over time, I just thought like, I want to cut out all the boring things from my life. That's one thing. And I began to do much more work on my own. But the second thing, I was thinking when we were starting this panel that before I knew many of the women on this panel, I knew of them. And I was their fan before I was their friend, You know, like, I mean, Meera knows that I've written her a message once on Facebook saying I'm your fan, because I was just like, this person is so funny. This person is so like marvelous. This person has such a big heart. Everything about this person is awesome. And I also had read Nisha Susan's work in Tehelka, and I was like, wow, this chick is so cool. And once she called me up to interview me for something, and I was like, oh wow, I'm so happy that she called me up to interview me, right? So I think, at least for whatever reason, I had that confidence to believe in the things I loved, and I only did the stuff that I only talked to the people that I loved. And I made a film called Unlimited Girls, which was about feminism. Like, that was the topic. And I think the most important thing I did then, which I didn't understand I was doing, was that I didn't fall victim to the innocence of men, the permanent innocence. Because when people ask you to explain this again and again and again, they're forcing you to stay at a certain level, right? They're pushing you back. When you start talking about the world, they're like, no, no, but first to tell us that why should feminism and why are you all saying all this? So they're continuously pushing you into a Lakshman Rekha, like stay in your corner, only talk about these topics. So when I made feminism, I just thought to myself, I don't actually want to talk about patriarchy. I'm least interested in patriarchy. Why should I spend 1.5 years of my life complaining about patriarchy and therefore talking about patriarchy? Actually, I'm really interested in feminism, and I think it's awesome. And there are some many interesting and exciting things it's shown me. So I will only make a film about feminism. So actually, Unlimited Girls did not have any of this is the problem. Patriarchy is there. I am so oppressed by it, you know. And I feel that once you start doing that, it opens up kind of wonderland. Actually, that room. Why be in the room?
Yeah.
And I don't care about that room only, is what I'm trying to say, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's a very big garden with many exciting nooks and crannies to do lots of.
So basically, you're saying leave the room. Like, don't, just leave the room.
Once in a way, but why should you feel constrained by the room?
By the room.
I think, you know. So I think that the manner in which men will continuously say, "Magar mujhe ye samajh mein nahi aaya." जो ना समझे वो अनाड़ी है, क्या करे? You know, like चांद खिल गया तो हम तो चले. So that is my general approach, and I think that what I'm basically saying, I'm not being facetious. I mean all of these things honestly, but I do feel what it does is it helps you to connect all the different things that people are doing, which actually are counter to the way that people are presenting the world. It allows you to maximize that and build a big body of work joined to other people's bodies of work, and have these networks of feminist thinking or non-patriarchal thinking or whatever we want to call it, and different ways of speaking. I mean, for me, finally, I don't think I went to girls' colleges, so I was pretty used to listening to women, right? For me, it was not something new. I have to listen to women. Oh my God, now I put on my honest face. I was listening to women. I was being taken seriously by women. So I got some, once I tasted that, you know, to rephrase Mephistopheles, why this is heaven, nor am I out of it. तो मैं काय को चाहूंगी तेरे कमरे में भाई? तो तेरी चाबी खो गई है, तो that's your problem. I'm not opening your locks, you know. So yeah, I guess.
Thanks, but just a quick allied question to this. Paro, you said that you're an independent artist, but it's also true that you run an organization today. You've set up a collective actually, and that has its own, and that's not the job of just an independent artist. It's much more than that, right?
Yeah, but I think that, you know, even being able to do that is a result of all the amazing people that I have known, who inspire, who help, who propel that work forward. And I would say at a systemic level, what something like Agents of Ishq, for example, does is that we always began with the assumption that women and queer people are the center of this narrative. We are now not again going to explain patriarchy. Explaining patriarchy should be cancelled. I feel that women who are spending a lot of time on Instagram complaining about patriarchy so bad to me are infantilizing the debate for themselves. There are a lot of amazing things happening. Like, let us spring out of this. Let us not discuss patriarchy and
also ये तो एक ही life है ना. What are you going to do with it? It's like
why
that.
discuss gents so much? I cannot give so much time to discussing gents. Okay, they are not evolving, then they are not. उनकी problem है, मेरी नहीं है. Right, like maybe in my own life, if I have to deal with a non-evolved person, I'll do it personally. But and so what happens is that, you know, you set a completely new terms of discourse when you make those spaces. And what is very interesting is we've never actually said this is only for women and queer people. But once that's our gesture, once that's the way we behave, that's what enters. And a new language is co-created by all these people. And then, of course, men also enter it. There are all kinds of men. And I think that other panelists will talk about it, that this kind of man that we're talking about is also a product of caste and certain notions of what is powerful, right? So there are other types of gents who are quite okay who are also coming and contributing to Agents of Wish, and now also some of them working in Agents of Wish.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I think that's how it changes. And lastly, I just want to say that as far as women are concerned, like I had an aunt who, if we used to answer back, would say to us, "Aho, tusi to meri masiyan ho," which means, "Oh, right, you people are my masis," right? So in my mind, anyway, I was brought up by Punjabi aunts, so I was not really under the impression that women don't have a voice,
Mm.
because and we've seen it during the anti-CA protests and many other such spaces.
Yeah.
Actually, in many different cultural spaces which are
Mm.
not so anglicized in upper caste and upper class, you do see a different language. You do see older women having a certain space. Why don't we give that space importance? Why don't we think that space is a political space of importance? Is also something to question, perhaps. Like, what is that room? Let us
Yeah.
not think that room and getting into that room is the apogee of anything, right? It is actually a constriction of what you can be. We don't want to be like gents. So we don't actually want to get into that room. We may invite them to our panel. Like today, we have not invited them. They are all crying. So
Thanks so much, Paro, for that. Raina, now I wanted to move to you and ask you that, given the kind of work you do at both at Chamo Bhavana and at Amrawat Booth, what has been your ways of dealing with all of this?
No, actually, we made Sambhavana because of this thing, that within the LGBTIQ community, we always felt that trans person, especially trans women, always use as token, but they don't have their own leadership in the sense of trans led group. So it's organically made. I don't think that it's made very after a real thought and lots of consultancy and all, because because within the LGBT activism, what I found uh, that uh, in a feminist version, we look at the trans Dalit, trans who are in migration, trans farmers, trans labor, and take them. This is the time to give them the leadership, and who are non-anglophonic, who have not that kind of educational privilege, and that that given us uh, a different kind of uh, shape of the feminine. And this is 100 times I would say that first I'm trans, then I'm feminist, and the version of feminist is not always to allow to indulge debate in all in your from your side. There is a word called no. You need to say it sometime. And what I feel that uh, I am very tired because I'm really thousand times from my childhood. I have this that you are a man. Why you are so ethical? You are a man. Why you are so feminine? Now I can answer them. I don't think femininity is okay. I don't think your masculinity is on the power of example of power. Because of this, all the violence is happening. And and वो टॉक में वुमेन लीडर्स को लाएंगे तो वो लोग झगड़ने लग जाए. मतलब जैसे मैन मैस्कुलिन की झगड़ने से भी ज्यादा गोमाबाजी करते हैं, उसको हम देख नहीं पाते. पर मेरे ख्याल से मेरे ख्याल से ये एक छोटा सा प्रयास है, ये कोशिश है कि ये ट्रांस लीडरशिप को विजिबली जितने बार दिखाऊंगी और जितने बार ये वुमेन एंड फेमिनिस्ट मूवमेंट के साथ मैं जुड़ना चाहूंगी, तो ये बहुत बैरियर्स आएगी. लेकिन ये 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 फेमिनिस्ट मूवमेंट मतलब सिर्फ not in the feminine version. The feminist movement is the is work as change maker of the entire society. So I have some limit, I have some burden, and I have some capacity to listen. And sometimes I feel that no, this is not your time, this is my time to say. तो ये बहुत जरूरी है, ये बहुत जरूरी है बोलना. और जैसे what I was telling you yesterday night, and because sometimes we need a space. Sometimes we need to give a gap of this, because ये सिस्टम से थोड़ा स्पेस लेना भी ये सिस्टम के बदलने का एक तरीका है मेरे ख्याल से. और मेरे माँ को देखी मैं खाना पकाते हुए, हर ट्रांस वुमन को देखती हूँ, वो काम प्यार से करती है. और मैं जब सिगरेट पीती हूँ और एक मतलब बायोलॉजिकली मेल और वुमन जेंडर के साथ पीते पीते रास्ते से जाती हूँ, तो सब हैरान हो जाते हैं. यही मेरे ख्याल से यही मेरा जीत है. मतलब सिगरेट पीना जीत नहीं है, लेकिन मेरे अंदाज से मैं जो सर उठा के जा सकती हूँ, ये जो लड़ाई है, ये लड़ाई ही मेरा जीत है. एंड आई डोंट वांट टू बी वेरी कॉम्पिटिटिव विद द masculinity, because there are different sort of masculinity. If we talk about the trans masculinity, then it is something different. And I think the way of communication is a big tool to use the patriarchy and to resist the patriarchy. Patriarchy in the sense of I'm talking about the entire system. And yes, we all are feminists, because what is the problem to tell yourself as feminist? But I never can tell that I'm feminist as quote unquote cis feminist. But I first am trans and then I'm feminist. So I would like to say myself as trans feminist. तो और ये ग्रास रूट लेवल में जितने सारे काम होते हैं और जितने सारे मैंने एक्सपीरियंस की है, और एपिस्टेमोलॉजिकल नॉलेज से जो बदलाव आता है, वो बदलाव मेरे ख्याल से और भी कड़क होते हैं और भी सख्त होते हैं. वो बदलाव को लाना चाहिए. और नहीं ना, मतलब मैं और नहीं सुन सकती, मैं और नहीं बोल सकती, मैं और नहीं आपको ये जगह दे सकती, ये भी बोलना बहुत जरूरी है ख्याल से. यही मेरे जीने का मकसद.
Thank you, Raina. And I can see so many connections between, what you said and what Paramita said just before this. And thank you for that. I want to move now to Nisha Abdullah. Through your work, both as a theatre maker, as an activist in Bangalore, you've been part of just so many movements in the city, as well as an educator. How does your practice deal with this? Also, in the first space, you talked about how, specifically being a Muslim woman, religion is constantly explained to you by men. What has been your ways of handling, and how does your work, your practice, define a kind of resistance to it, or try and build something afresh from it?
I just want to yes, and a lot of what Raina said, because this thing of, a lot of what Paramita said as well, this thing of not engaging and deciding that this is the space I want to operate in. These are the spaces I choose to show my work. These are the people I choose to work with, and be unabashed about it. For me, the most critical question to ask was, who are the people I want to work with, and the kind of rehearsal rooms I want to have. So as someone who's leading a rehearsal room, as director, as someone who is creating as a writer, as a playwright, I hold a lot of power to be able to, bring these stories out. So one critical question, of course, was, who are the people I want to work with? And I don't want to waste my time dealing with, people who don't understand these basics. Yeah, I'm tired. I don't want to do it. I'm not going to, it's hard enough to be an independent theater maker. There's so much you're fighting against. I don't want to, do this in the rehearsal room. The second, of course, is just this understanding. These are all so like significant mental shifts for me. This understanding that I'm going to tell this story because I want to tell this story. I'm not going to choose to tell this story because it's representative of some, most characters tend to be Muslim in my storytelling. I'm not going to take this burden of representation, right? So that was a huge moment for me. And I'm still processing what that means actually. Because my earlier plays had a lot of that. Like I see it and I cringe. I'm like, what the hell were you thinking? Why were you pandering to this? Especially because my work is also political. There's a lot of that, like head on in the plays that I write. So sometimes I cringe and I'm like, why didn't I come to this realization before? And I also realized I didn't come to this realization before because I wasn't hearing enough of, these kinds of spaces as well, who told me that it's okay to look away from these spaces and create your own, band with people who will join you in creating these spaces as well, right? Yeah. The other thing, of course, is my work as educator. A lot of my work is with teenagers, with early adults, with young adults, and any writing workshop, any theater workshop, it will have intersectional work. So that becomes an into all kinds of power structures, so that we're not only looking at these symptoms and these manifestations, but we're also kind of tackling the root of it. This one time, this 13-year-old boy who, in the first book that we had to choose as part of the class book club, he was the one who was leading this thing about, I don't want to read this book. Look at the book cover. There's, it's about a girl. There's nothing in it for the boys. He's 13. He was very loud, and he was trying to influence the others as well to not vote for this book, right? And he was kind of silencing the other voices as well. At the end of just, accessing multiple kinds of stories, he actually said this to me once, that towards the end of the workshop, that, it is about girls, but it's fun stuff. And so he was able to relate to the humanity of those characters and did not look at them as, and like at that moment, I was just like telling myself, stay cool, don't ruin the moment, it's so important. So my work in education is also a lot about these, just to very unapologetically say that this is how it is. Just seeing me also, I think, being, the anatomy of power, just seeing me also discussing these, I think makes a difference. Somebody else spoke about, what do these bodies of authority and power also, what can they look like? Like, so being in the rehearsal room and leading a room, that is also important. Yeah, just that this can look like power. This can look like a creator.
So Nisha, little bit, I'll just ask you an allied question from here, specifically in theater, and we know how burdened we are with the great men as part of the heritage of Indian theater.
The
right?
Dada culture is very real.
Yeah, the Dada culture is very, men work with men. It's there in every field, but I'm asking you specifically because you as an artist work very specifically in a field that's a collective, right? Mostly theater can also be done alone, but you, I know, work in a collective, and therefore even within your independent arts thing, there's a leadership role that you have to do, which sometimes, say, a writer who's only writing stories does not need to rally like 10,000 people around them, right? How do you negotiate that space? Because that is not often, how do you negotiate that space? Because there you can't often choose the people you want to, right? Not always, of course.
Not always.
It's a dream if you can.
Yeah.
But, and also, like, Paramita makes films, and there also she has to work with a large number of people. Meera, Raina, Kavita, except for Nisha, actually, all the others sort of work with large number of, Nisha only for the writing bit. I know she also teaches, etc. So there are other things, Nisha Susan. But Kavita needs to again work with a large number of people. Mass kind of collectives, Meera does that too. So I'm just wondering, how do you negotiate that in theater when you're making theater?
I've just very Bindas just called it out. I've just said, I'm not appreciating the tone. I think we need to begin again. I think this is exactly what I said. You're saying it back to me. Did you realize that? Yeah, so I call it out. I choose to call in many of the times, but that's also because a lot of the times conversations like this tend to happen one-on-one or in a smaller group, not necessarily with the whole cast and everything. So maybe by virtue of the kinds of conversation they are, it's easier because it's maybe one-on-one or maybe 3 people in a group. So I'll just say, hey, listen, I have a problem with that. I'm calling it out. And I honestly don't know what the future repercussions of that have been, because I don't know what I don't know and how it's being talked about. But I know that it makes me feel like this is the only way to do it. Because at least whether they agree with me or not, at least they'll be conscious of it the next time. And the calling in helps because they're not defensive about it. At least they're like, acha, okay, she's my friend. She's also my director. So there's some, to put it very bluntly, leverage that I have. But I also want to say that I'm able to do this because I wasn't able to do this for so long. Like I was working, before I was a full-time theater maker, I was also in the corporate. And it was horrible. Like, bosses who would tell you, you need to smile when you're presenting, and, don't tie your hair up because, you look nicer. Like disgusting stuff, right? Telling me how to do my job. And that time it was so hard to do this. It was so hard. At best, what I could do was get someone else to agree with me that it's, I don't like it, right? So that's the most I could do. I could maybe rope in someone else and say, hey, listen, you didn't think that was okay, right? Listen, that's not okay. Laugh and joke about it and convey that it's not okay. Now I just don't laugh and joke about it. So it's also the privilege of, I don't know, age, experience and all of that. And that's so real. That context is so real. I've seen, for example, in performing venues where the tech team of performing venues have treated, theater makers, directors who are women so badly, right? They're treated really badly because why? They're 25, 26, and what do they know about lights, right? And there have been so many instances where the director, the young woman is saying, no, I don't want it at this intensity. I want this, or I don't want that placement. I want here. And the tech guy says, ma'am, just see this, no, just try this, no, this will work, I'm telling you, right? So it's a fine line between, okay, they're also your team, you can't antagonize them too much, at the same time to be able to say, because you're in that particular, you're 25, 26, 27, whatever, and to be able to say this, it's so hard. Like, I just feel lucky that I somehow made it here without being too burnt. And it shouldn't have to be that way, no?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Nisha. I'll move to Meera. Meera, what do you think? I mean, in your practice and in the activism work that you're involved with, how do you tackle it? What are some of your tools, techniques, things you can share with us?
I think, yeah, before going into that, I was just wanting to also pick from what Kavita was saying about Ramban, and someone else was talking about Lakshman Rekha. So I think it's time we bring in Sita and Surpanaka into the Zoom room. And, because, yeah, I mean, बाण हमारे हाथ में होना चाहिए, and then नाक किसका काटना है ये भी पूछने का वक्त है शायद, because many times it's a नाक का सवाल, no, in terms of, why men don't listen to what, I mean, if the same thing actually comes from another man, I think the way the terms of engagement are very different than, against the same thing coming from a non-man. And this is an experience, I think, as friends have said, it's almost an everyday experience. Like I was just sending Arundhati almost every second day posters of, manuals that one came around. Actually, lag raha tha, one way of this barn should actually be ki if someone really wants to do a PhD on all these, manuals that have happened during the pandemic, तो मेरे पास पूरा resource है ना, like literally, if you 100 posters of Manals और सबका phone numbers भी है मेरे पास, तो मैं तो बोलूँगी तुमको मैं सबका numbers दे दूँगी, you just call and badger these people. You know, that's one way to actually pick on their brains and keep calling them. Well, that was on a lighter note, but no, it's true that a lot of times, and in fact, this also connects to what you were just saying a while back. There's one thing that some of us are maybe more part of active feminist spaces, and there's a different kind of solidarity and understanding. Not that feminist spaces are, you know, quote unquote perfect, and no, we must constantly keep reflecting and moving ahead there as well. But for a while, I also want to talk about the mixed political spaces that many of us, I mean, comrades like Kavita, myself, others are part of, and the kinds of challenges that one actually go through over there are very different, because the levels of empathy, the levels of understanding, the levels of mansplaining are very different actually. So it's almost a challenge on an everyday basis, right? You have to keep, I mean, sometimes also checking yourself. I know that, I mean, yes, I can just bully myself through and then say कि नहीं नहीं, you know, मुझे जो लग रहा है वही सही है, and I know that this is right. I mean, within me, I know that it is right, but to actually be able to convey that and to get along, I mean, a section of people with you, to get them to ally with what you actually believe in and to translate into action is a whole process of labor. Right. So I think a lot of times what really, and there is such an invisibilization of this labor that we do also many times. So the same thing, jaise kai baar, I mean, just last week it happened, there was a, yeah, again a manel only. So I was just informally talking with that other friend. So I mean, it was so interesting the way the poster was written. So 3-4 men hi the us par, and then and it was about trade unions or something like that. So the word veteran was written over there, the descriptive veteran trade unionist का ऐसा कुछ. So I was like, या तो महिलाएं trade union movement में है ही नहीं क्या? I mean, could you not find even one woman who's part of the trade union movement, or are women not veterans? I mean, what is the issue here? So ये जो I mean, this kind of taking for granted that I mean, despite women across identities and locations investing so much in all movements, are so easily invisibilized when it actually comes to engaging women and non-men on equal terms is, I think, a challenge that we go through on a daily basis. But what we've like over time also seen is, I mean, there is definitely a difference when you put in the labor to actually, and not in a tokenistic way, but to actually look at, and it is not impossible, because exactly like what you were saying, Arundhati, at the start, ki, I mean, oftentimes I think men always take the easy route. हाँ, हमने एक phone घुमा दिया, कोई मिले नहीं, there's no women, or so there's that. It's a very superficial way of doing things. But when you actually invest, when you actually do the labor, you would really find that there is, I mean, there's a whole world out there. There are so many women, so many non-men, so many people doing excellent work, and it's always possible to bring them on board. And you know, you also find different ways of having them as part of conversations and change work, and we've actually seen that happen with a lot of the political work that you know, many of us have been trying to do. But this whole labor is also a feminist labor that men many times neither acknowledge when feminists do, and in fact oftentimes also, you know, pick bones with. So yeah, there's all of that struggle with that. But one additional thing which I wanted to say in this context is also many times, and exactly like what Rohit Vemula also wrote in his letter, that you are often reduced to your immediate identity. It's also something that happens to a lot of us, right? So for instance, when I mean, I would often be asked to speak only on you know, trans experience or trans issues, which of course I can, but of course मैं तो किसानों के मुद्दों पर भी बात कर सकती हूँ, मैं तो कुछ और पर्यावरण पर भी बात कर सकती हूँ. I mean my politics is a broader reality about me, right? I mean, my identity is an integral part of me, but the politics that defines me is much more broader. And I think this is true for a lot of people actually. So one of the things that we've actually been trying to do in many of the conversations that we hold is also to not only reduce people to their immediate identity, कि अगर कास्ट के बारे में बात करना है तो ओनली, आई मीन, कोई साथी दलित कम्युनिटी से बात करेंगे, या ट्रांस एक्सपीरियंस के बारे में बात करना है तो यहीं से करेंगे, but also make sure that people from different locations can speak of different experiences and political perspectives as well. And I think that is taking quote unquote intersectionality also to the next level, Right. So when we, as much as we talk of unmaneling the world, it's also important to really take diversity seriously. I mean, why would you think that someone from a Muslim location would only speak of, I mean, of course, they can speak of the experience of, Islamophobia, but they can also speak of environment, or they can speak
Financial inclusion. Yeah, whatever.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you don't have to kind of, decide people's competencies or people's abilities to engage on multiple levels of political perspective. So I think this is as much part of the entire
Diversity question.
Indian
Yeah.
diversity
Yeah.
question.
And that's so interesting because some time ago I was telling Paro what a delight it was for me to listen to her talk about loneliness. Because normally when Paro gets invited to any panel, it will be love, sex, dhoka nahi hai abhi tak Paro, but love, sex, feminism. That's what she, or as a woman filmmaker.
Dhoka mein bula do, I have lots to say.
but so I was just joking, saying that kitna acha tha wo loneliness wala. But then people call you for your immediate identification. But the other thing I noticed, and this is to combine something, Meera, that you said and Paro and Kavita said earlier, which is at one end, if a room has 20% women, men will say कि 50 से ज़्यादा हैं, बहुत सारे हैं. On the other hand, there was a time when most Indian banks were being run by women. This is some time ago, around 10 years ago, I think. ICICI, HDFC, HSBC, I have huge interest in finance and banking, etc. So I used to keep track of all these women who were super corporate women running banks. And yet, at every finance panel, you would really find it hard to find women speak. So somehow when it is there, you don't see it. I don't know what will be called that, perfect selective blindness or something else. When it isn't there, you see more of it. And when it is there, you don't see it. That's another particular trait that I find quite fascinating, actually. Okay, moving to Nisha Susan, I was just thinking that as a writer, and you've also led Ladies Finger, you were running people. I actually assume that you have the total privilege of like working alone and you can just decide whatever you want to do. You don't have to deal with anybody else. Is that true, or do you also have to like negotiate, etc.? Because your stories, and I love reading your stories, they open up such amazing worlds for me of women, of friendships between women, of connections that happen, sisterhoods, all kinds of things. But I've never seen them as women's stories. Because for me, they were like, like Nisha Abdullah was saying that, yes, her plays have a lot of Muslim, but it's not representational. So for me, your stories become slice of life. But when I've noticed when I've asked men to read you, she's a woman's writer writing about women's stories. Now, it so happens you have tons of women in your stories. So I don't know, through your practice, how do you negotiate this world through your writing? What happens?
So it's true that I was thinking while Meera was speaking and while Kavita was speaking, that if this was my calling, as it is Meera's calling and Kavita's calling and Nisha Abdullah's calling, what would I do if I had to deal with men as part of my like goal in life? What would I do? I feel I would retire very early because it's just okay. So in the context of some of my work, you have a group call. A group call is actually a good example where you just have a lot of voices, and usually there are many women introducing. That's just the context of my work. There's a lot of women introducing themselves, and they're all like, we are all speaking in this high-pitched voice to each other to express eagerness and excitement to be with each other, even though it is the 400th thing that we are doing that day. Okay. But we're all like, we're so happy to be with you. Okay. And then there's 20 minutes of, conversation about whatever. And then there is some like token man in the room. Okay. Now the token man will introduce the first khadus note of that day. Okay. It will be like, but it is not possible, basically. Okay. So it is not possible because it is not reality. Whatever you are saying, madam, is not reality. Okay. And so, so this thing about what is reality and what is realism is like a big preoccupation of mine, not as an artistic pursuit, because I'm constantly looking at people and thinking, why are you telling me that this is not realistic? I mean, it's a little embarrassing to narrate this anecdote in this stellar cast, Subhash Ghai cast of like political activists that we have here. But once upon a time in my youth, I was involved in a small movement. And then there was one very strange man who decided to make a film about it. So then he called me. We will not mention names, but he called me. Well, actually, not him. His producer called me and said, do we have permission to write this story, which is about this movement that you were involved in? So I was like, yeah, man. I mean, if you make it, you make it. Like, what does that got to do with me? A few months later, he called me and said, we have cast this big new Bollywood actor in it. And I was like, oh, okay, what is he doing? He will be playing your role, ma'am. Okay. So I said, what? Okay. Until then, I was like, freedom, liberty, speech, everything. And then I said, but why is this person who looks as Paro once said, Muli, playing me? So he said, because it is not realistic that a woman would lead a movement. Okay. So, I mean, that is, I think, my best example of realism. Kavita. So anyway, so I think what works often is to behave as if men don't exist, and I think if you have a lot of practice, then it becomes real. It is obviously more possible in feminist spaces, but it is also possible, I guess, to work in Federal Bank in Alwa, okay, and work in like all kinds of places which are all women spaces, and then just not think about men, and to not to worry about what they see, So I think the question of my book is a very good question. So I wrote those stories over time. My editors are women. My agent is a woman. My favorite readers before the book was published are all women. Then, my cover is pink, whatever. Okay, it just continues in this manner. And there is a even for me, someone who has practiced a lack of reality for a long time, being out of touch with reality for a long time. Even for me, occasionally there is this thing that, oh, for an author photo, you should try to look serious, because seriousness looks a certain kind of way. Seriousness must look like something is biting your ass, like that. But so at every moment you feel that pressure. And the reason you feel that pressure, I should say, I feel that pressure, is because that seems like the path to power. The path to power seems to be laid out in these ways. You look serious, you write about riots. These are the only important things that exist in the world. And, you let your work, your aesthetics, who you work with, if you are the curator of a film festival, who do you invite to that film festival? All of those things, the woman who decided to, disinvite Paro was thinking about like adding her value and power in the world, right? And these are the paths that are laid out for you. And sure, all the women in this panel have privilege, of course we do, but what it is also that we have power, right? And we have power, which is why we are sitting in the evening and having this uproarious conversation. And we can also be the face of power, and by offering like those gremlins who are let out at night, we can offer multiplying faces of power and multiplying ways of being powerful. To look at Meera Sanghamitra online, which is the only way I know her, or Kavita Krishnan online, which is the only way I know her, which is to see even in the mainstream world a different way of being powerful, right? And I think that is the pressure that we should embrace. The pressure problem, the problem with a conversation where there is one Khadus man is that Khadus man sucks up all the energy, and you feel so, and you feel that sense of diminishing joy, like, why did I get up in the morning, why did I create this thing, Why am I in this meeting? You know, everything. It is that person who will tell you that there is not enough salt in your biryani. It is basically that person. Okay. Oh, okay. So then you feel like disengaging from the world because joy is being taken away from you. But the tension there is you have to pursue both joy and power at the same time.
Yeah.
We can't, I mean, we should wear flowers in our hair, it's necessary, but the flower in our hair should be because it is both joy and also represents power. It is not because we have run away from the cast of some Devanand movie. I mean, Paramita is going to reach through the screen and slap me, but you know what I mean. Okay. So if enough women wear, you know, flowers in their hair and continue to also embrace power and do the things that we can do with power, the way power looks will change. And then it will change space for, you know, many more people who won't have to spend all their time thinking about what the gaze of a man is seeing, right? And then even that Khadu's voice can slowly stop being significant. Like you can put down the phone and then forget about that person. That's I think being out of touch with reality as the male world defines it is a very useful state of delusion to be in. You just walk around as if you own it, and then, you know, aage we'll see.
Thanks, Nisha. Thanks for that. You know, you were saying this and I was thinking of Sultana's dream.
Oh,
Like,
wait,
right,
sorry,
just
I want to
that
add a small addendum.
one.
So the Women's Stories book, sorry, I'm going to quickly plug my book. Guys, plug everything. Okay, all other panelists. So this is my book. It came out last August.
If you're plugging, you have to show, like, hold it properly and show
Sorry,
it
it
for
was a
3
very-
seconds.
Yes,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
So
Can you
this-
read the name of the book?
Yeah, the book is called The Women Who Forgot to Invent Facebook and Other Stories. They forgot only to invent Facebook. Okay. You know, the point that I was making, other than plugging, is that a book of women's stories published by, you know, women editors, my women agent, read by women, is going into reprint. Okay, and it's going into reprint in this because what do I care if men are buying my books or not? Like, it doesn't matter. So that really is what I wanted to add. I interrupted you.
No. I was just saying you're saying away from reality. Actually, it was one of the first stories I think I read ever in Bangla, which kind of said, oh, okay, there are women's stories, which was Sultana's dream actually, and I didn't read it in English. I read it in Bangla, and it was very poetically translated, and it gave me this whole world I could be part of, which was totally not reality. It was totally like fantasy, etc. So, but at this point,
Aru, I want to just add
yes,
something
yes,
here.
yes.
So Ranga Shankara, there's this European theatre maker who's visiting. She's in high heels, she's in red lipstick, she's owning her look. She looks gorgeous. And I'm with a bunch of people, many of whom I'm sure you would know, Aru. And they're all talking about how she can't be a serious theatre maker because she looks the way she does and wears heels. And I just, you know, what Nisha was saying was just, I happened to talk to her 2 years ago when I was on a residency. I met her, right, in Europe. And I told her that, you know, this moment is kind of imprinted in my head because I walked out of that group saying, you know what, I need to get coffee. And she's like, you know, you got to live your life, babe. That's all she said. She said, you got to live your life. And we had this beautiful conversation about how it is such a privilege to be able to do that. But she's like, don't take that on yourself. If you can do it, do it.
Yeah.
Because you're also, like, you know, Nisha was saying, you're also showing that this can be power and joy at the same time. If there are people here who have read Joyful Militancy, that's something I would really recommend. Joyful Militancy is a beautiful, beautiful essay that talks about exactly this.
Yeah. You're right. I mean, both Nishas, you know, and I mean, because, and this is talking about organizations and leaders, because I happen to lead one, that most organizational roles across all kinds of sectors are mostly run by men. And so the idea, the picture of leader of an organization that you generally have is a particular picture. And in most cases, when a woman, a non-man gets that position somehow, then most people are looking to see either how she's going to fail that role and that position, or how she's going to fit into that chair that was made for not her, but someone else and graced by someone else, etc. And therefore, give out that sense of, you call it kharoosness, one could call it seriousness or be taken seriously, and therefore no high heels, no red lipstick, no flowers in the hair, and a lot of other things. So that's also a question about leadership. And how do you, I love that you said, how do you embrace power and joy together? How can that be like a heady mixture? At this point, we have...
Aru, can I just make a very quick
Yeah,
intervention?
yeah.
Speaking of flowers, because I mean, some of the movement spaces where I was part of, there was this very famous slogan, ki desh ki
Phool
nari
nahi
kaisi hai,
chingari hai.
phool nahi chingari hai. So this is something that we always kept questioning, ki who decides ki hum phool honge ya chingari?
Exactly.
Or hum to dono ho sakte hai. I mean, we can be the fool, the flower, and the fire, right? And we decide when to be what. And so, I mean, that agency and that autonomy is with us, right? So you don't get to decide. And being a fool is not, it's not a sign of weakness in any way, right? It's a celebration of ourselves.
Of joy, but it's also that you can't have joy in the revolution.
Absolutely.
It's
you can have both, right?
Yeah.
I also have a little intervention at some point, Arundhati, no problem.
No, Kavita, say, because after this I have surprise guest. So before surprise guest,
ठीक है. No, I wanted to just sound a couple of notes which are not very happy notes, not that joyful notes. The problem is, I think that, what Meera said basically, but I can't, in the work that I do, it has never been an option to sort of, create a world of your own, because the whole idea is that you're continuously having to explain absolute basics to absolutely everybody. And that itself is part of the job. I think the tired, and I don't find explaining it to someone to whom it is new actually tiring or boring. I find that fun. I find it tiring when people who ought to know better, so I wonder if I am, spending time around people, I tend to pick up on stuff they are good at and pick up quite a bit of things. I may not be good at certain things, but I do pick up basics about quite a few things which are not my areas of expertise. So why is it that if you have spent around 20 years around me, then why is it that you can't learn that you don't say, acha, he is a gay, na? Please don't. You should have learned by now not to do this. Why is it that you cannot pick up on something basic? Why is it that I have to again teach you this basic thing? That is tiring. And the other thing I was thinking is, when it comes to being tired of things, is that what exactly again, roles. No? So the idea is, because you are women in a space that is largely masculine, there is also much more pressure on you to be in roles which you may not want. And I mean it because people expect. I feel this all the time, that there are few women leaders in communist parties. So everybody is always asking, bhai, aap phala kaam kyun nahi kar rahe ho? Why is a man doing that? Now, I would love for a woman to do that, or a non-man to do that, or anybody to do that. But that's not me. I am not happy doing that job. I'm not good at it. Just because I happen to be a woman whom you are seeing in that in prominence, you immediately, and there's an implied judgment then that you somehow are not not willing to do this, and so that's not the way it should be. We need lots and lots. We shouldn't have one or two to pick from and then, put all the burdens on them. So I just wanted to share that.
Kavita, I'll just add to this from a slightly different lens. So when I became the executive director of India Foundation for the Arts, I was asked by some people, whether I have a big enough house. So I didn't know, because I said, but wo to office hai, why should I have a big house? Like office ke log to office mein baithenge. It's like, no, because you need to entertain at home now. So since I am a woman, I'm expected as a leader of an organization only because if I was a man, I could have taken people out, whatever. But here, as a woman, you're suddenly seen as somebody who also have to, and you might call people home in any case. That's different. You might love cooking or not love cooking. But as a woman, if you are a leader, then certain additional benefits come with that. Part of it could be that if when you're ill, the woman will ask, the man may or may not. If the man asks, it's great, it's a positive. For the woman, asking is natural. वो तो woman है, वो तो पूछेगी. If you don't, then it's a problem. So there are certain things like that also, certain roles, which as leaders, you're expected to do extra because you're a woman in certain cases. So
Yeah.
that's also additional pressure on.
And one tiny thing which I didn't want to miss out in this is that part of the thakan, part of the tired sense of being exhausted is not only because one is dealing with male leaders. It is also because a lot of women also who are in these roles for various reasons. We all know the reasons, right? Why you internalize that kind of judgment. But the point is that I spend a lot of energy, especially with women of an older generation. I find this far less in younger women and all of that. But there's a lot of energy involved in trying to dismantle a whole range of misogynist prejudices and homophobic prejudices and so on among women as well, who have, so it is it's that part is kind of really irritating, and I wish one could press fast forward button and get into a space which is not like this.
Any of these, yeah. So we have a very special, guest now. This is an area which none of us actually come from, and is often seen as male bastion. It's the idea, the space of science, STEM. Okay. So we have with us today Prajwal Shastri. She's an astrophysicist. She's just retired from the Indian Institute of Astrophysics in Bangalore. She investigates the physics of, and I'm going to read this out, accreting central supermassive black holes in distant galaxies and their impact on star formation in their hosts using multi-wavelength data. Prajwal, we are delighted that you could join us. I also know, and Nisha has told me so much about your work with calling out misogyny within, the world of STEM, standing up for women, pushing for women, fighting misogyny in different spaces that you've been in. So we want to listen to you a little bit about your experience of all this that we were talking about. Manel, mansplaining, and more. One sec, Prajwal, you are on mute.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here. And I unfortunately could not listen to all of you right from the beginning because of something else. But I have been listening in the last more than half an hour. And it's simply amazing how I could just substitute some of those words in all that you said, and it would be things that happen in my area as well. I mean, that is it's just it's amusing at some level, it's annoying at some level. And for example, somebody said I'm to just my gender identity. That is again, so true. Only non-men have gender. Men are normal. So in my field, it's normal physicists are men. I mean, physicists are men, and then the women physicists are some slight weirdos that one has to put up with, that sort of thing. It's now become sort of politically correct to talk about gender equity and this and that, but still you find that the vocabulary, it's still so, it'll be Stri Shakti, and it will be that women are so hardworking, or they're so systematic, and stuff like this. I mean, it's almost like I can't be an untidy whatever physicist. It's just so amazing how these patterns get reflected. And now there's also, of course, then this thing somebody said, you have 20% women they say, oh, lots of women. So when I joined the Indian Institute of Astrophysics, which Arundhati mentioned, it just so happened, for reasons that are maybe a story for another day, my institute is one of those that has been less hostile in terms of hiring women. That doesn't mean the climate is all gender equitable, but at least in terms of hiring women, it's been less hostile. So there have been roughly, 10%, 15% women for a very long time. And that is huge if you take the normal physics institute. But at the time I joined, this is like a quarter of a century ago, it so happens that 3 or 4 women joined. And so then, it's IIA, right? Indian Institute of Astrophysics. So if I met some astrophysicist somewhere and they asked me, so where are you? And I would say IIA, they'd say, oh, Indian Institute of Apsaras. And and I don't know if you sort of get it, but I don't know how many physicists you knew who are like 60 years old, but we come from this generation where I belong to that kind of mindset that Nisha just described, this expert theater person, and just because she wears whatever, she's considered less competent. I have to say, I was of that mindset myself. So we were scruffy. We didn't pay attention to how we dressed, and we that was our sort of statement in a way. And so to be said, like Indian Institute of Apsara, it was like the worst insult possible, for somebody like me to hear that. And it just boils down to, like, you're being just reduced to your gender identity, right? I mean, they didn't say. So I worked in a field which was relatively new for my institute at that time. There were only a couple of people working in my field. They didn't say, oh, they've hired somebody in such and such field, or like one more. They didn't say that, right? They just thought of me as woman. And so that's just a pattern. And of course, manals to pucho hi mat. It's we have to just keep plugging at that. Even what Nisha said about how junior technical staff treat you like you don't know things about plugs and lights. That's like so typical. I just cannot. It's just amazing. So what I am looking for now is that when we try to strive for equity, that's not only the women's work. So one of the things I've been trying to say, that this is everybody's responsibility. It is the leader's responsibility to take this on, and not just gender inequity. There is a lack of diversity in our field. And the thing is, okay, one reason why it's really, really bad that it happens in physics just like it happens everywhere else is that we pride ourselves on being a very objective science, right? So I think we are extra culpable as a community to, continue to have these sort of biases, and the whole hostile climate, biased climate, all of that. So I'm interested in, shifts happening, shifts of mindsets, and not shifts by the march of time, because there are predictions which say if we just allow the march of time to take its course, then it'll be like 100 years less before there is any kind of equity. So not the amount of time. And I think the answer, we think, people like me try to say, okay, here are the statistics, look at the trend, see the writing on the wall. But I think the answer lies more in techniques that derive from people like Nisha who are on this panel, methodologies from the arts and theater and all that, which we need to invoke in order to bring mindset shifts within us. And it's not just the women, it's everybody. It's everybody, because, we're all raised to be patriarchal, so that reflects somewhere.
Prajwal, just one more question for you. That is that, given that during your time, when you were within the institute studying, and then you became a scientist, joined an institute, there must have been, were there fewer women, right, or as your work colleagues? So how did you handle this? Because even now, when one talks about science, there are so many scientists out there who are non-men, and yet either their work doesn't get enough focus, or it's a systematic making invisible. It's not just in one place. It is the kind of work, it is how the work is valued, it's how the work is awarded, it's how journals write about them, or how, the sort of celebrities of the science world, whether they are profiled, whether they are appreciated. So it's a whole ecology that treats women in a certain way, right? In any field for that matter. And so but you were at the sort of the beginning of all of this, with women getting into science, etc. How did you deal with it? Like, what were some of your toolkit?
I didn't have one. So, well, for one thing, when I entered, until college, it was totally fine because, I come from a very privileged background. Both my parents were like nth generation educated. They were science buffs. I had science books brought to me right from being a child. We watched the night sky after dinner from my town, all of this. I was like really, my parents were very, they were educated, they were science buffs, they were very, very thinking kind of parents. They were very progressive politically and all of that. So I cannot, could not have asked for anything more. I went to a college in a small town, which was a women's college, and in school, a girls' school. In school, my only men teachers were Kannada teacher and the music teacher. Everybody else was a woman, maths, science, everything. And in college, even in physics and also in chemistry and so on, there were a mix of men and women teachers. So I never felt anything there. There was the zoology department and the botany department were headed by women. In physics, there were both mix of men and women. The only PhD in physics was a woman, and so on. So it's only when I went for my master's to IIT that it kind of hit me. And that is a pattern we see, that the higher you rise in eliteness, the worse the inequity is. And so it's clearly a systemic issue. It's clearly needs to be tackled at the roots. And so when I entered IIT, I think it kind of, lots of things shocked me. I had a very nice group of women. We were just 80 women among 2,000 men students, and we were all in one hostel. So we had a lot of very strong bonds and so on within the hostel. But there were many things that shocked me. I think it was just my cultural capital which enabled me to survive. I think that's all I can say. We didn't have toolkit. We didn't have the vocabulary even. I mean, we didn't know, although we experienced sexual harassment, we didn't know those words. Forget about a recourse mechanism and all that. We didn't even know those words. So, yeah.
Thank you, Prajwal. Thank you so much for joining us today and for taking this time. It's meant a lot for us
to
listen to you and have you as part of this evening. So what I'll do is I suddenly realized we've been talking for 2 hours. So I shall quickly move to some of the questions that have come up. Now, only one question I see, Meera, you said you would like to answer. There are 3 other questions. So just whoever wants to just pipe in. So one question that's come from and most of the questions are anonymous. So I'll just pick and choose and tell you. The first question, I feel like there's a tacit understanding in society on men having a monopoly on intellectualism. Opinions, ? So Meera had said, Meera, you would like to answer this?
No, I didn't say that, but yeah, I can just have
okay. I think it's come up as, sorry, Meera wants to answer, but Meera, would you like to, or anyone else, if you would like to take?
I think I'll just come to it in a while. I'll just have a look at the question.
Okay. Anyone else? Tacit understanding in society on men having a monopoly on intellectualism.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We see this in the kinds of, for example, in the art space, in the kinds of plays that are billed as,
Feminine.
must watches. Yeah, must watches, cerebral, even the experimentative stuff. Everything is labeled according to, according to that. Even in the way that we write about our women artists, right? So there is a cult that builds around the male artist, but never one for the woman. I'm not saying that the cult is the way to go, of course not. But if the men gets the cult, then, and there are so many women who are doing so much more experimental work, content and form-wise, who never get written about in the same way. So they will have like a piece that is about, acha, ye play aa raha hai, this is what the play is about, and this is what the experience of making that was. But there will never be these glowing, reports about how, what their work stands for and how it's pushing the boundaries, etc.
They're never heartbreaking.
Yeah. So the canon is always male, no?
Yeah.
So we always like learning the canon as male. So if I'm trying to like teach, right, younger people, then just to access those plays, which are not the canon, and have all of these beautiful, amazing things to say in such revolutionary form, is that itself is a struggle. Yeah.
Paru, you're mute.
To extend something Nisha, Susan had said earlier and join into this, and also something Meera was saying, right? That it's not only that men have the monopoly on intellectualism, which they do, but that certain kind of form is considered to be intellectual, right? The form that mostly is used by men. So to give you an example from film, realism is a very beloved form of men because it presents them as these kind of pioneering, like you're cool by association with fictional criminals. It's a very complicated thing that they managed to do. But the idea of gritty realism somehow symbolizing that you're a real man, that this is reality, and we have the courage to tell reality as it is, so on and so forth. Now the thing is that every time that work is done in that way, you'll find a woman filmmaker becoming considered important. Never mind that the woman herself has chosen that path. Like I don't like to complain publicly about women choosing that path because people are trying to get what they can get in life. But if a woman decides to make a film in which, again, she thinks gritty reality is just showing how horrible sex is, and she will be so much applauded for that. So actually, that tokenism of where women will be like pseudo men in a way, and that the masculine intellectual or cerebral complex will not be threatened, that's a very big thing. So when you're being amusing, like I'm always told, why don't you write a book? Because writing 10,000 columns or whatever I have done so far is obviously still too little because the book is the canonical form, right?
Yeah.
So it's very difficult for somebody.
And it is serious. So like if you're a serious writer, proper writer, then you write book. Then you don't write column. Yeah.
So inability to recognize also, as Nisha said, as Nisha Abdullah said, that there are different forms that people are using. That humor is a form, that wit is a form, and the incapacity to recognize that. And of course, it's always more heartbreaking when it's women or queer people who don't recognize it, because one does not see whether you are a very domesticated in a traditional sense and well-conditioned nari who says, I have no expectations from men. And whether you are the opposite who also doesn't have too much expectations from men, we just mean it in two opposite ways, right? But I'm saying that actually we do hope for those who are engaging with the world of arts and ideas, and especially if they're women and especially if they're feminist women, we want for them to be able to recognize and idealize and adore and create cults. And the eroticism that is around the male artist, it does not accrue around the woman artist. So the woman artist, in order to be important as a writer or as a filmmaker or as anything, always has to prove that she's doing something socially important. She can't just be an awesome writer. She should also be good looking, like in one way, very thin, high cheekbones, straight head, a wispy expression, and a raw mango sari. Sorry. ये सब में आपको हम accept कर लेंगे. Some collarbones will also be nice.
What did you say? The last bit?
Collarbones are also nice.
Collarbones, yeah. So that, it's coming to the next question. And if somebody will take that, how can we deal with women who sustain patriarchy when the women lack sensitivity towards rights of women, especially those women at superior positions of hierarchy? I mean, Paro, you were just saying that, for when women and queer people don't place importance or take it seriously, then. So I guess this is connected to that women who are in leadership positions, when they are not sensitive, when they are not sustaining this, how do you deal with that? When they become vehicles of patriarchy? I can't see who's taking that. Is anybody?
Isha Susan was going to say something actually. So
Isha,
maybe-
you were, I couldn't see her. Yeah.
No, I was going to say something totally typeface, which is that if you've seen the movie Dear Zindagi, isn't that the movie with SRK as a therapist? I mean, the entire movie is just like beautiful, like so many lovely things happen in it. But my favorite thing that happens towards the end is, I hope I'm not like in some muddle stage mixing up movies, but I think towards the end, there is a movie screening. Okay. There is a movie that is screened and on the beach, and current boyfriend, ex-boyfriend, future boyfriend, everybody turns up for this movie screening. And then everybody says, it's just amazing, you know, and they all look adoringly at this woman filmmaker. I watched it and I had such a big laugh because I was like, this is so great. I mean, the rest of the movie didn't matter at all. Just this scene could be played in a loop, which is a woman artist showing her work and everybody looking like it's, you know, the third coming of some god somewhere. Okay. So it was, I just feel, basically I'm saying we should form cults. Basically, that's what I'm saying. Short version. Cult.
Thanks, Nisha.
Immediate formation of cult.
Immediate formation of cults. Thank you. A second question. Anybody wanting to take this question about women who become vehicles of patriarchy? Anyone? Just raise your hand. No one?
I'll have a, yeah. So this is something we struggle with as well in the arts. There is a certain fear / discomfort with taking this on, because a lot of them also come with a lot of cultural capital. And with that also comes a certain worshipping of the senior woman, right? Because if you have gray hair and if you come from a certain background, then that is an acceptable woman, you know, who can be there. If there is an acceptable woman in positions of power in organizations, especially in the art organization, it would be the gray-haired older woman of a certain background. Personally, I have no ideas. I've struggled with this very, very much. Some of the ways in which I've learned to understand this better is by talking to those who came before me. And that, for me, that was very important. Just to be able to reach out to someone who's been in this space, you know, of independent theater making, have gone through some of this before, have struggled with these, oh my God, that was cringe. Should I be saying something? I want to do something, but what can I do? Just speaking to, you know, some of them are in this room right now, actually, they're listening in. So just to be able to call up and say, listen, this really bothered me, you know, and for example, someone who's been accused in the Me Too case by multiple people, you know, is involved in this thing, and I want to say something. And, you know, these are women who would help me navigate some of this. That then becomes like my bank of understanding to navigate this with somebody else who's younger. Like I've had many younger women call me and say, listen, there is this one director who called for one reading. Is it okay to go? Banda kaisa hai? You know, and that's great. Like, you know, this is exactly the kind of thing that we should normalize. You know, that there is this, you know, there are these women who've been through this before you. Why should you have to reinvent the wheel? So just reaching out to those who are accessible. Not everybody is, who are accessible, who are willing to talk, you know. Most important, little clubs of women too. Like, what is this only boys clubs that always do this passing of gyan and all this social capital? No, why can't it be women's clubs as well doing these things?
Thanks, Nisha. Nisha, I will take two more questions because I think I'm also looking at the time. One question is specifically about dealing with, this is coming from Shorbori, dealing with women's fear of engaging with feminism and patriarchy. Is there an implicit understanding that fear is undesirable? So if fear is felt, how does one engage with that when women fear even engaging with patriarchy or feminism in a certain way? What do we do there? How do we handle that? Anybody? Meera, you want to take that?
Yeah, I mean, the different thoughts. I don't know which question I'd be answering, but it's actually very true. In fact, I was just also listening to what Nisha was saying, that there is often in time, I mean, not just in movement spaces, but in also other spaces, we see that there is a certain form of cult worship, or so the kind of further challenges it creates for people within those political spaces to ask, I mean, politically sharp questions becomes that much more difficult, right? So, and then there's this whole politics of balance war all the time, and to piece you out saying ki tum bhi shant ho jao, tum bhi shant ho jao. I mean, theek hai, hum shant hi rahenge, but the point is allow us to ask us our questions, right? And they are important questions that need to be asked. So, I mean, there is this constant attempt to do this balance war, then to kind of not allow.
Did you say balance wad?
Yeah.
It is just a balance wad. What a
So,
word. Yeah, thanks, Meera.
and then what happens is, so there are these very funny but really scary allyships that happen between the men who want to sustain patriarchy and some of the women who also draw a certain form of power from the existence of patriarchy within these spaces, right?
Yeah.
So how do you actually break free of this? I mean, it's very true. I think we've seen this, I mean, manifest in so many ways actually. And questioning it every time. I think, of course, we keep questioning it. Some of us become the bad witches all the time. But I mean, the cost of being a witch also doesn't, it's a lot of cost basically, emotionally or politically. So we keep doing that. But because there's also then this pitting of this good woman versus the not so good woman within that progress as well. So these are.
I just want to add something.
Yeah.
Please, Kavita, go on.
Kavita, go ahead.
No, just briefly, basically to say this, that, to agree with Meera and say that, again, I'll say that I have patience with and can even enjoy and not be bored by engaging with women who are not really exposed to feminism as such, and may have all kinds of reservations about all kinds of things, but they are doing other kinds of work that I respect and I can engage in, no problem. But again, I think it's a phenomenon, absolutely. And I see this all the time, especially with the, let me call it out, the sexual harassment cases involving famous men and men who are part of our lot, the secular progressive lot. I find that the most vicious kinds of attacks on the likes of us who are feminists and take a position on these things are basically, that attack is often spearheaded by women. And it's articulated exactly as this, that we are the reasonable women. We are the women who are here to, basically call a spade, and we are the ones who are not, just going to believe any sob story and all of that. And the point is that then they're putting you in this strange position where, as it is in society, what you're trying to explain about sexual harassment or something like that is not common sense. The opposite is common sense, right? And so whatever you're saying is made to look all the more ajuba, it is something which is a perversity on the part of these lynching feminists, So I think that, and I do think that is in fact, that's not something to laugh at. That's actually something pretty dangerous. And I don't have any toolkit. I find myself completely disarmed in the face of this. I feel particularly helpless in the face of this. Yeah.
Thanks, Kavita. Thanks for that. I really would. Paru.
I just wanted to add actually to what Kavita was saying, that, when somebody really is not, like if there's somebody who's really not had the opportunities to know differently, one can understand the fear. Like if you've always had to live very conventionally, it creates fear that should I leave my violent marriage or whatever. I think like for me, the hardship is that we are saying is women fear feminism and engaging with it, but really they don't wish to give up other privileges. Their privileges of class or caste are intertwined. Like that idea of intersectionality, that once you decide that you want to be in a feminist way of living, then you're going to give up many things. You're going to give up some privileges which are to do with other parts of your identity that are
Comes from patriarchy. I often also, yeah.
I mean, like if you're an upper, I mean, what the whole thing about the Me Too conversations also, that, you know, the rush to give lollipops to men because they heated up dinner once. So they couldn't possibly have been indulging in sexual harassment, which I saw people writing these kinds of comments in some cases, right? That this man is decent because he eats the biryani and that's all he needs to do to prove that he's a feminist. आगे वो नहीं तो वो कैसे कर सकते हैं, वो तो भगवान है. This sort of thing. But I mean, these things are tied up with their privileges, the privilege of caste and class also, and importance in society in other ways. So it's very hard for people to give up that, because I would say that whatever one critiques about movements like Me Too and the manner in which they play out, but one thing that they have done is actually force women to look at the men of their own castes and families and their social circles, and actually question that, can I continue to maintain my privileges in other ways and not have this violence visited on me? Like, what is the way out of this? And that intersectionality of change is really shown up. You cannot. So I think sometimes being fearful of feminism is really a fear of losing other privileges. And I'm not always that, I don't engage with it. I'm not empathetic. I do feel that that's one thing. I feel it's a dog whistle thing. And it makes people, as Kavita is saying, people like us more fragile. It puts us more on the margins, and it makes us more precarious. And then, of course, when something happens, we are supposed to speak for it, because you're so fearful of feminism. How lucky for you.
Thanks, Paramita. Nisha, you wanted to say something?
I'll just very quickly say this. Some of the most difficult navigations to make was at sites of resistance, right? Like Bilal Bagh, for example. There were, when Paramita says intersections of class and caste coming in, there was a certain kind of older Muslim women who were listened to, right? But the younger Muslim women who were not listened to, even within that, the men who wanted to take, control of decision making were not comfortable with women like me who don't present in a certain way, right? And so the orthodoxy that was involved in these sites of resistance, both in, with the men and the non-men, were also trying to prop this up as, a specific kind of Muslim woman that's out there in protest, right? So these were and they were constantly shifting. Because not just is this, some of these older women also wearing markers of religion, some of them come from great privilege as well, they are what would be the cream of, in terms of social capital of the minority community. And so for a lot of the women who were sitting in protest, to constantly have to be told, that this is why you're here, this is what it is. How many of them were actually coming and talking to the women who were sitting there? So this constant movement of class and caste and identity, but how also what is the gaze that others have of you, right? All of that became this mix that was so difficult to navigate at a place like Bilal Bagh, right? Because things are also moving so quickly. So all of this jack that I said meant nothing at a space like that. Yeah, I just wanted to put that out there.
And actually, Nisha, if you remember, there was one particular instance, taking this further, where, and the trans community was supporting this movement so strongly, right?
Yeah.
And a couple of men, I think one man went up and said something quite derogatory.
Yes.
And about he was there in a women's space with tons of women, and he said something about this typical chudiya pehenna type, something, I don't remember the exact thing. And a trans person went up, and who was, I have forgotten his name, and he went up and said, please don't say that, because there are people who have, fought and given their lives to have the freedom of wearing a chudi. And it was just magic. For me, that's a magical moment from all the days that, we were sitting there. Something happened, something shifted that day, that moment, and we could all feel it. I can't articulate it, but I get goosebumps when I'm
Yeah,
even
I have goosebumps right now
Yeah,
thinking of the
yeah,
moment. Yeah.
yeah.
And it was in that, pandal, that when we were sitting in, there were all of these women for whom so many of these ideas were newer, and they hadn't seen people who were in these bodies saying these things. And for them to sit here and say, you know what's important is this shared dream, so come sit, right? Of course you belong here, because they were very consciously leaving the men out, right? You remember the barricade.
barricade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then for these women, loudly shouting and saying, you belong here, you come in, taking ownership of that space. Oh my God, it was just beautiful. So much to learn from that.
So I have one last question from
Arundhati, just one quick
yes,
intervention
Meera. Yes.
on this whole context, because a lot of times what also happens is, I mean, women are just a bunch of women are seen to be a substitute for a feminist understanding or inclusion, which is not the case, right? So one constantly needs to be saying कि, I mean, it's not कि आपने एक bunch of महिलाओं को यहाँ पर ये कर दिया कि include कर दिया या whatever, but that doesn't really mean that there is this real feminist perspective. So there is also a battle at that level many times, because once there is this, like what I think exactly Nisha was saying a while back. So it becomes that much more difficult to say that. Then they would always say कि ये तो है, महिलाएं हैं यहाँ पर, तो आप इनका सुनिए and all of that. But then the perspective difference between what some of the women who whose tilt is more towards patriarchy and less towards a feminist liberative understanding, and the other women younger and all the non-men is, there is that chasm over there. So I think it's also important to many times understand this reality. So just the presence of women in itself is not an answer to patriarchy, or is not representative of feminism. So there is.
May I allow to
Yes,
say
yes.
something?
Yes, Raina, please.
I just want to say that in total discussion, what I found that there is something which we are missing, that intersectionality and inclusion politics is not same. And I'm 100% agree with Meera and Kavita. And Meera knows that I am associated with different sort of movement, and I am also working on Pariyavaran and all this stuff. And it doesn't mean I can escape the journey of my trans life. That doesn't mean that I cannot disacknowledge my identity, because always it is always remembering me what 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 is the existence of mine. and I think the entire journey is very much pluralistic, and I think that is the exact liberation what we are finding and fighting about. Thanks.
Raina, thanks. Because there is a question I was going to ask you that had come on the Facebook. Somebody who had asked, are feminist movements themselves right now inclusive enough? And that's a very Shoma Malik has asked this question. And I think in part you have responded, but I thank you for that, Raina. I'd also ask if there's anybody else who wants to just pipe into that. We have one more question from Samira Iyengar. She wants the panel's view on versus making space and taking space, and how do panelists respond to that as in the work that we are talking about, in the kind of work we do. So maybe if one person could take the feminist being inclusive enough, and one of you can take the making and taking space question, that'd be great.
Can I respond?
Yes. Kavita, which one? Do you want to go with the first one? Feminist?
No, I would like to go with the
second one.
Okay. Making space. Yeah. I was just saying, it's something I experience all the time, that one has made space, and you're there in that space. But I'm continually surprised, let me say, or taken aback sometimes by how very well-established men in the same in the same general sphere they recognize you, they know you, and you're assuming that they know your work as well as you know theirs, that they have given it that respect. And suddenly you're taken aback by the fact that they haven't paid any attention at all. And in fact, they've just associated you with some stereotype. Let me give you the example I have in mind, the latest one. So it was a couple of years back when, I was at an airport together with a very well-known activist and all of that. And I don't want to name the person. There's someone well-known in basically art and activism circles, right? So I got a call from a journalist who, some girl who just asked me something very silly like, oh, I want you to give a quote demanding the death penalty for so and so. And I had replied to her saying that, no, you should have looked up my work. I'm not for the death penalty. So, that won't help. But I was fairly patient. But when I put the phone down, then this gent asked me, what was that about? And I told him. So he said, yeah, but that's what you all did na 2012-13 wala jo movement tha. You all basically, yeah, you all did that na. You all demanded death penalty. And I'm like, the entire effort, the difficulty in trying to carve out a space in that movement to actually push a different narrative and finding a degree of success in that. Hello, at least, have you listened to me? Have you heard me? Do you know me? So you're completely taken aback because that person's entire oeuvre of work, everything, every piece of creation he has made, I'm familiar with, I'm a great fan of, and I would never make such a mistake. I would never, ever have made. So, I feel as though even the taking of space, you may be there, but basically it's almost as though, the struggle is also to make people actually open their ears, not just see you and give you some space there as some woman who is doing something vaguely feminist,
Also on the inclusion question, it's, I think, also the reality that, and something that all of us on this panel would agree, that there are many feminisms, right? So, and the struggle, and also I think the beauty has always been that these many feminisms have interacted. Of course, they've fought amongst each other, they've learned from each other, they've interacted with each other, and that has collectively made our multiple feminist understandings richer in some ways. Of course, I mean, we've had a lot of difficult moments as well, but there is a feminist experience that comes from an anti-caste position. There is the feminist experience that comes from the trans and queer experience, from the experience of Muslim women, so on and so forth. So I think the multiple social locations from which these feminist viewpoints come make our feminist understanding that much more richer. Yeah, but are we inclusive enough yet? Obviously, I don't think we have the authority to say yes, because it is an ongoing journey. But if you look at how feminist movements across all locations, I would say, from the working class feminist movement to other forms of feminist engagement, vis-a-vis other movements, one would honestly say that the propensity to engage, to be open, to change, to interrogate yourself is definitely more within the many feminist spaces. And I think that's part of what keeps us alive constantly and glued to this part of our political work as well. So
thanks, Meera. Thank you. One last question. This is for Nisha, specifically for Nisha Abdullah. Techniques of calling in versus calling out. I think somebody, let me see if
I answered that. I don't know where it goes after you answer. But I hit send.
It actually vanishes.
Actually, no, actually it says Nisha.
Oh, it's an answered. It's an answered.
Okay.
Okay,
got it.
Oh,
yeah,
right, yes.
so, if that's helpful, but I can be specific too if you'd like. But these are some of my.
I'll just read it out, Nisha.
I can read it out. I can read it out.
Yeah.
So what are the ways of calling in as opposed to calling out your colleagues? Always in person, never on text, never on call, as much as possible in a one-on-one context. But that, of course, depends on how safe you feel in this situation. I also try not to smile too much. I don't want to take on the burden of making them feel comfortable. I'm uncomfortable and it will show. So just some of the things I could think of right now. Yeah. But if there are specifics, I'm really happy to connect offline, especially if this is a theatre maker or an artist who has very specific context, happy to.
I think we'll just have to take one more question and then I'll be quits. Okay. This, I'm sure people are hungry. It's 9:30. So just one last question and then all my thank yous to so many people. This is coming from Inji Pennu. She's saying, what's the framework for resolving feminist conflicts? Are there books or write-ups? Because I always feel I don't agree to feminist groups always, and I'm always an outlier. But how to resolve this conflict, feminist anarchy? So, Paro.
I think the answer was partly in what Meera already said, actually, in talking about inclusiveness. And this is something I feel very strongly about, the idea of agreement and disagreement. You know, like if you cannot, Urvashi Butalia in Unlimited Girls says this thing that, you know, when people are like, oh, all people, everybody knows that the history of feminism is just a bunch of feminists fighting with each other. And then all the younger feminists are scared to speak because we don't know which older feminist doesn't like the other one, right? To me, this is very much a mindset of what isn't in the room, when in fact, there are many, many rooms and many movements and many feminisms, right? But I do think while making Unlimited Girls, I saw a very interesting thing because I read the cyclostyle reports of all the feminist conferences that had happened over years. They were all in the CWDS library, and I sat and I read through them. And that those transcripts led to the idea of the chat room in Unlimited Girls, because what I saw was a long-term conversation. First of all these people used to have big ladai and really say horrible things to each other. I mean, for example, the one famous conference where, you know, queerness is not a feminist issue was actually decided at the end of the conference. So this was very hurtful to the lesbian feminists or the feminists who are lesbian who were in the room. And then they have come back. The next conference, everybody has come back, even the hurt people. And they have changed the way they have thought. They have maintained their conversations. And actually that I think has been a strength, right? So of course, Dalit feminists have said that the Tisha Banu case has shown up schisms.
Yeah.
Even when there was a concept like there is a feminist movement, as opposed to what we now understand, there are many, many movements. So I do feel the history of engagement in the feminist movement makes it vital and open to change, even though there may be examples where it doesn't change. I think that there is I'm sorry, I'm taking up time because I feel.
No, please, Paramita.
I also feel it's all right to disagree. We are living in a time where we are so fearful of disagreement, and we see disagreement as a kind of catastrophic moment. If we are in the presence of disagreement, also we feel triggered by it and we can't cope with it, right? But actually, love and disagreement can coexist. You can acknowledge that you like something about what somebody has done, but you really don't like something they're doing right now. And I think calling in, which Nisha Abdullah is talking about, yes, is partly that when you fight with your friends, all the love that you shared doesn't stop existing, but at that moment you may feel very, very angry with them, and they may actually have done something pretty semi-unforgivable, right? But you keep engaging with that and keep changing your relationship. So I think that one doesn't agree with feminist movements, one can write about it, one can engage with it, one can say, I'm not up to it right now. But I do feel that an engagement with the history of feminism really helps us to deal with this. For me, it did. Sonal Shukla, whom I interviewed in Unlimited Girls, she said it then. I didn't understand it properly, what she was saying, that now there are a lot of people who think that just because they are women and they talk about a few women's issues, they understand feminism, but they don't want to read the debates that have gone in to all the changes that have happened and how these things have happened. And I think that has become worse now, because I see so many young people who will quote feminists, for American feminists, frankly speaking. It's not like they're also reading 1,000 feminists from all over. There's a kind of, there'll be little bell hooks here, a little bit this thing, a little bit that thing. And a lot of it will be, they'll always cherry pick the lines, which are much more about some emo type of thing, right? But if you ask so many young people, I have personally asked, because I'm such a nasty person, that can you just name 10 Indian feminists from the last 25 years? Not just now, last 25 years. They cannot even name 3. And I don't mean it for Inji. I'm just using Inji's question as a takeoff point, because I think Inji is saying, what do I do with that disagreement? And it's tough and we have to go through it and find ways to express it, I guess. But I just feel like if you're not engaging, then even the space making and space taking, like what is it? You're all the time saying, I want to take space, but you also have to make space. Both the things go together. I'm making a space for myself, but I also must make space for others because others made space for me. And just by saying intersectional, you don't become intersectional. You have to act intersectional, right? And there are many ways of doing that. We learn it from each other every day, right? And I think that when you're in that process, you feel wounded when somebody calls you out or says something about you. Of course, you feel wounded, but you also go back in because you believe in that space and you believe in each other, right? So, yeah.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Paramita. That makes so much sense. Even practical sense about friendship, sisterhood, solidarities, relationships, essentially. That how do you deal with differences and how do you go back to that same space to the next session, like the next episode of that difference. And the conversation. Yeah.
That Nisha Susan wants to say something, but I want to add one thing that, in every, because I talk so much about sex and relationships and all that, every talk that I give, I have noticed that there'll often be a young person saying, my parents are not letting me do X thing. So how do I convince them? And my answer is always, don't. Just do it. Why do you need everybody to agree to what you are doing? Like, people are not going to agree to what you are doing. Just do it. Like, my parents also didn't agree. They definitely thought I was cuckoo for many of the things that I did. And the general feeling towards me by all and sundry was, this was a girl with so much promise, or dekho ye kya kar rahi hai, documentary and all that. Right? And living in tenement housing colony and all that. Yeah, after some time, they got used to it. Probably in the end, they'll always feel that you could have been a contender, but instead you did this. But I'm not waiting for that agreement because how does it matter? So if you want to do something, you do it. They will learn to, you don't have to do it horribly. You don't have to be horrible to them, I mean. But you do it and there'll be a little hardship. There'll be hardship and you'll deal with it and then taking it.
Yeah, Nisha, you wanted to say something. Susan?
No, just to connect what Paru was just saying back to what Kavita said about the person in the airport who said you people. So that inability to differentiate, on one hand, to see sort of a monolithic mass, as opposed to someone looking at feminist movements and seeing very fragmented or seemingly fighty groups, is the difference of paying attention, right? I mean, when feminist movements or groups look at each other and see difference, it is an expression. It is an expression of politics and love to pay attention. Attention is love. The man in the airport was not paying attention, so then it was not love or politics, right? It's just that what I wanted to add.
Thanks, Nisha. Anyone else? Any last words from anybody?
There's one question there that I would really love to take.
Yes.
It said you're talking about taking space and what about making?
Samira had asked that, could the panelists reflect on taking space as well as making space? Both.
I think everyone in this room is doing exactly that by one of the things being part of this and opening the conversation out to a larger group. Specifically in, for example, the theater, just a couple of months ago, before the second wave madness hit us, we put out a call, the rehearsal room that I was part of, for Dalit, Bahujan, Adivasi, minority communities, say tech and crew, right? And we hadn't come across something like that. At least we hadn't in the circles, in the theater making circles everywhere. And we had to really figure out, okay, what is it that we want to say? What is the language we want to put out? Like really, like a lot of time and effort went into that one call out that, went out. And it took time to make this happen. Eventually we had two people who joined us, but it took a lot of time because it felt like we were, in the same kind of loop, and we weren't able to get out of breach the bubble. But eventually we did. So I just wanted to say that there are a lot of people, especially the independent makers who are working in these intersections of, theater, community, activism, etc., who are doing these things. And it's annoying, but also amazing that a lot of our cues are not necessarily coming from the artist ecosystem here, a lot, or rather the seniors, here, a lot of it is coming from us having to figure this out ourselves or taking cues from other theater cultures. And it's disappointing many a times, because, we often don't have very straightforward fixes, because maybe at some point people just gave up on trying to find these fixes. And there are a couple of us who keep reminding each other, we can't like give in right now. Yeah.
Thanks, Nisha. Meera, you were talking about, you had put out a message, and I wanted to ask you that we haven't spoken much enough about collectives of feminist struggles and solidarity in times of, as I'm quoting Meera from here, in times of individualized feminisms. I do think that is important. Meera, a little bit about that, and maybe we could end on that collective note then.
Yeah, no, because I think it's both, right? It's not an either or thing. All the time. As much as since the whole feminist understanding is a value, as much as it is valuable at the level of the individual, and the personal is extremely political, it is also important, I think, to look at the immense possibilities of and the rich histories of feminist struggles as collectives, as the solidarity spaces that have actually dreamt many dreams and actually walked many a difficult path and actually challenged many sources of power. So I think it's also important to look back at those, and also currently, I mean, in our contemporary life as well, there are so many powerful examples of collective feminisms, collective solidarities, with a feminist worldview. And I think it's also important to look at our assertions, individual assertions of feminism within those collective dreams and collective spaces as well. And I think that would make our politics that much more richer and inclusive. Also, just one point I wanted to say, which is, I mean, it might be an outrageous and I might be hauled up for contempt, but speaking of the Supreme Court of India, since Kavita also mentioned it at the start, if there's probably, and since this is a panel about manels, right? So if there's one manel in this country which is most powerful, the largest manel and the permanent one, it is the Supreme Court of India. So I think, and that manel, right? I mean, most of the judges over there, and I just like to also quote our friend Kavita Srivastava from the feminist movement, who said it on one of our groups a while back, that, and it's true, I think all of us know, there are some lawyers on this group as well. The higher you go in the judiciary, the fewer are the women over there. Yeah. Hardly any Dalits, absolutely no Adivasis. So, I mean, the highest institution of justice in this country is so non-representative. And
so not just.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think what kind of a signal is such an institution sending out to the rest of the country is also, I think, something that we must think of as a parting note. And therefore, every single institution in this country that we speak of needs to be inclusive, starting right up from the Supreme Court. I know it's an extremely difficult battle, but yes, we must keep talking about these permanent manels also that sit on those high benches and give justice. But how inclusive are they is also, I think, part of our political questioning that we must keep asking.
Thanks. Thank you, Meera. Okay, so I would end at that note, and it honestly, for me, it started as a little kida in my head, and I had no idea, and I invited all you guys for a discussion, and Paramita scolded me into action, saying you have to set things right. And then Nisha and Meera, all of them gave ideas. We put it all together and we sort of structured this. So thank you, all of you, each one of you, Nisha, Kavita, Meera, Paramita, and Raina, for making this happen. This is like, to me, a feminist collective. So thank you very much. I have 4 other women that I have to thank, because without them, this wouldn't have been possible. I would like to thank Shanchari, who did the wonderful image that you see. Shanchari Bhattacharya, she's an artist. She's done the image of the 3 women that you see in our posters. Devoshmita, who has done the poster with the fonts and putting us all there. And she did it like on a quick turnaround time of like over one night or something. And thanks, Paro, for getting her to do that poster for us. Darshana, my colleague, my dear friend, who's been the backstage queen for all of this. She's the one who's managing this entire show today. Thank you so much, Darshana. And Titash, who's from Kolkata, she is a reporter. She suddenly called me up one day. She works for Shangbad Pratidin, and she's done this little thing where she has all of us there and talks about the need for a discussion on this. So thank you so much, Titash, for having us out there. And of course, the wonderful, wonderful audience today with so many questions. And, you know, I'm not even looking at the comment section because there's like tons. This is a recording of this, so I'm going to go through all the comments. I think that will be another night of a lot of fun to just go through all the comments that have come. We recorded this, so I am going to put this up on my little YouTube channel and share, and I would request everybody to share it. This is a conversation that I wanted to have initially only one-on-one with you guys, but then I decided, like a good person, that I must share it with the world. And I'm feeling damn thrilled that I decided to do that. So thank you so, so much for
Good
being
for you,
so-
Arundhati. Thank you.
Yeah,
Right
thanks,
back at you.
What fun. What fun we
For
had.
imagining and I
so
think
much.
dreaming of this panel for like what the past 1.5 months.
Yes.
Every
It was great to be with everybody.
Thank
I,
you.
of course, was so eager. I managed to try and join 1 month early.
Yeah, Kavita, and almost missed it today. We thought Kavita has forgotten. Yes.
No, no.
But thank you. I know how busy all of you are. So it's a lot of time you give to this. So thank you. Again, bye, Raina, Nisha, Kavita, Paramita, Meera. Hope to
Bye,
see you
everyone.
guys
Bye, bye, bye.
physically
Night,
soon.
night, everyone.
Bye, audience.
Oh,
Thanks.
yeah.
Bye, all.
Thank you,
Bye,
everyone.
Bye.
Rebecca and Prajwal, thanks for being there with us today as well and sharing your thoughts. So bye-bye and see you soon.
See you.